She knelt in the dirt and gathered the scraps they'd thrown at her feet. The wilted greens, the jerky gone hard, the flour nobody wanted, and she did not cry. Evelyn Harper had been left on that Montana road like a crate too heavy to haul, and the whole town had watched and smiled. But a woman who's been thrown away learned something the comfortable never do. How to make a feast from ruin. If you love a story where the one they mocked becomes the one they beg for, subscribe and stay with me to the end, and tell me in the comments what town you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. The wagon didn't slow so much as shudder to a halt. The driver, hauling back on the reins like the horses themselves, were eager to be rid of what they carried. He didn't climb down. He didn't tip his hat. He reached behind the bench, took hold of a single canvas bag, worn thin at the corners, and dropped it into the road, where the dust rose up to swallow it. "This here's the Carter place," he said, not looking at her. "Far as I go." Evelyn Harper sat a moment longer than she should have. Her hands were folded in her lap, the way her mother had taught her to fold them in church, and she kept them there still, because if she moved them, she wasn't sure what they'd do. "You could take me to the door," she said, quiet, not begging, just true. "It ain't but a quarter mile." "Horses are spent." "They ain't spent. They're rested. We stopped an hour at the creek." The driver's jaw worked. "Ma'am, I done my job. Got you here. Rest is between you and him." And then, because a man who does a small cruelty likes to dress it up so it looks like sense, he added, "Truth told, I'd have thought twice about the load before I paid for the fare. But that ain't my business." Evelyn looked at the back of his neck red from the sun, and she understood him completely. She'd been understanding men like him her whole life. So she gathered her skirt and she climbed down, and the wagon creaked and tilted with her weight, and she heard him grunt, like the sound itself proved a point. Her feet hit the road. She was 32 years old, and she had been many places she wasn't wanted. And she'd learned that the arriving was always the hardest part. "Good luck, Mrs. Harper," the driver said, and it was the cruelest thing he'd said all day, because it was almost kind. And almost kind is the shape unkindness takes when it wants to feel clean. Then the wheels turned, and the wagon pulled away, and the dust it kicked up settled slow over her shoulders, over the faded blue of her cotton dress, over the cream apron she'd washed 3 times to look proper for this. She stood alone. She did not watch the wagon go. She'd learned not to watch things leave. Instead, she bent, and it cost her something to bend. It always did. The town would have laughed to see it. And she picked up her bag, and she straightened her spine, and she looked down the road at the low sprawl of the ranch. Cattle somewhere off past a rise. A curl of smoke from a chimney. And a man coming out from between the buildings, coming toward her the way a man walks when he's deciding something with every step. Evelyn set the bag against her hip and waited. William Carter was a big man, and he moved like one who knew it and had stopped taking any pleasure in the fact. He stopped 10 feet from her. He looked at her the way a rancher looks at stock at auction. Not cruel. That was the thing she'd remember. There was no meanness in it at all, and somehow that made it worse. He looked at her from the boots up. He took his time. "You the cook," he said. "I am." "You're Harper. Evelyn Harper." "Yes, sir." He was quiet. A muscle moved in his cheek. Off past the barn, a hen fussed and went still. "The agent in town." William said slow. "He wrote me a woman. Said she could cook, keep a house, mind 2 children. Said she was strong." He paused. "He didn't write me all of it." Evelyn felt the words land where they were meant to land. She'd built a place inside herself years ago for words like these, a room with thick walls, and she put them in there and shut the door. "He wrote you true," she said. "I can cook, I can keep a house, I can mind children better than most. And I'm strong, Mr. Carter, stronger than I look, stronger than you're figuring right now standing there doing the figuring." That got something out of him. Not a smile. But his eyes came up off her body and landed on her face, and it was the first time since she'd stepped down that a man had looked at her face. "I got no use," William said, "for someone I got to take care of. I got a ranch to run and 2 young ones, and I lost—" He stopped. Whatever he'd lost, he wasn't going to hand it to a stranger in a dusty road. "I asked for a cook," he said instead. "Not for another mouth I got to worry over." There it was. The whole of it said plain. Evelyn nodded slow. And then she did the thing she'd taught herself to do, the thing that had gotten her through every door that had almost stayed shut. "Then don't take care of me, Mr. Carter." She lifted her chin. "Don't worry over me. Don't spend one thought on me you don't spend on your own 2 hands. Just give me one chance, one meal. You feed your men tonight, and if they push it away, if one man leaves the table hungry, I'll walk back to that town on my own 2 feet, and you'll never lay eyes on me again. That's my offer. That's the whole of it." The wind moved across the yard. Somewhere a rope creaked against a post. William Carter looked at her a long moment. "1 meal?" he said. "1 meal. There ain't much in that kitchen. Been living off jerky and beans since—" Again the stop. "Since a while. Whatever the last woman left didn't get used. Half of it's likely gone bad." "Show me the kitchen," Evelyn said, "and let me worry about what's gone bad." He almost said something else. She watched it come up in him and go back down. Then he turned, and she understood that turning was his way of saying, "Come on," and she picked up her bag, and she followed him across the yard, and she felt eyes on her from the bunkhouse, from the barn door, from everywhere a man could stand and watch a fat woman walk and make his little private judgment. She'd felt those eyes her whole life. She kept her chin where it was. The kitchen was worse than he'd said. She stood in the doorway and let her eyes go over it, and she did not let her face change, because a face that changes is a face they can use against you. There was a sack of flour in the corner, with a crust gone hard across the top. A crock of lard turned yellow at the edges. A string of jerky hanging by the window, so dry it had gone near black. A basket of vegetables that another woman would have thrown to the hog's carrots, gone soft in onions sprouting green potatoes, with eyes like an old man's knuckles. A heel of cabbage browning where a knife had left it. A few withered things she'd have to get close to name. Behind her, William stood in the doorway with his arms crossed, and she knew he was watching for the moment her shoulders fell. They did not fall. "Well," he said. Evelyn set her bag on a chair. She untied her traveling shawl and folded it and laid it down. She reached behind her and drew her apron strings tighter, cinching them the way a man cinches a saddle before a hard ride. "Mr. Carter," she said, and she rolled her sleeves to the elbow. "How many men eat at your table tonight?" He blinked. 6 hands. My foreman, myself, and the 2 children. 10. 10. She nodded, already moving, already lifting the lid off a pot, already turning that basket of ruined vegetables over in her hands, like a woman reading tea leaves. "Then you go on and run your ranch, Mr. Carter, and I'll run this kitchen, and we'll see about your 1 meal." He stood there another moment. She felt him decide she was either brave or foolish, and she felt him decide he didn't much care which, so long as his men got fed and she got gone. "There's a girl in town," he said from the doorway. "Used to come do the wash. Folks'll ask how it went the hire. Word travels." "Let it travel," Evelyn said, not turning around. "Word's been traveling about me my whole life, never yet caught up to the truth of me." That was the closest she came to letting him see the room with the thick walls. She heard him leave. She heard his boots cross the yard. And only then alone did she let out the breath she'd been holding since the wagon shuddered to a stop, and she put both hands flat on the work table, and she bowed her head, and she was not crying. She never cried where it might be seen, but she stood like that a moment, gathering the way you gather before a thing that's going to take everything you have. Then she got to work. She was still at it when the boy came. She'd heard him before she saw him, the particular quiet of a child trying to be quiet, which is louder than any noise. She kept her hands moving in the dough she'd coaxed back to life, with a little of the good water from the well, and a knob of the lard she'd cut the yellow off of. She didn't turn. "You can come in," she said. "Kitchen's the one room in a house where everybody's welcome. Didn't your mama ever tell you that—" A silence, then small and hard. "My mama's dead." Evelyn's hands went still in the dough for one beat, one only. Then they moved again. "I know it," she said gently. I'm sorry for it. That was a foolish thing for me to say, and I'm sorry I said it. Come in anyhow. I could use a boy who knows where things are kept. He came. She heard the scuff of his feet, felt him circle wide of her the way children circle a strange dog. She let him. When she judged he'd come far enough, she turned, wiping her hands on her apron, and got her first look at him. He was maybe 7. All elbows and suspicion, with his father's dark hair and somebody else's soft mouth held tight right now to keep from trembling. I'm Evelyn, she said. What do they call you? Thomas. He looked at her the way the whole world had taught him a boy ought to look at a woman shaped like her. She saw the look forming. She waited for it. But then his eyes went to the table, to the dough, to the vegetables she'd cut new life out of, and the look never quite finished. You're the new one, he said. Pa says you won't last. Did he now? He says the others didn't. He says nobody stays. Thomas jutted his chin, and it was his father's chin, and she nearly smiled. He says I oughtn't get used to you. Evelyn crouched down. It cost her everything, cost her, but she did it so her eyes were level with his. Well, Thomas, she said. Your pa's a smart man to warn you. Folks do leave. That's the truth, and you're old enough to be told the truth. But here's another truth, and you hold on to it. I ain't left yet. And I don't intend to. And a woman who's cooking your supper is a woman who's planning to be here at least till it's eaten. So how about you don't worry about tomorrow, and you help me find the salt, and we'll let tomorrow worry about its own self. Thomas stared at her. Something moved behind his eyes, something that had been shut up a long while. Salt's up there, he said, finally pointing. On the high shelf. Sarah moved it up so Katie couldn't reach it. Katie's your sister. She's 4. She don't talk much no more. Not since... He stopped. She was learning this family stopped at the same place, all of them, like a wagon rut, worn so deep the wheel couldn't help but fall in. Not since your mama, Evelyn said softly. Thomas nodded. Well. Evelyn straightened one hand on her knee and reached the salt down easy from the high shelf, and she saw the boy register that she'd reached it without a stool, that there was use in her size after all. Then maybe Katie and I will get along fine. I don't need a body to talk much. I just need 'em to be hungry. Is Katie hungry, Thomas? I don't know. Everybody's hungry, Evelyn said, turning back to her work. Some folks just forgot how to say so. She sent him for eggs, and he came back with 4 cradled against his chest, like he was afraid she'd count them and find him wanting. She praised each one. She sent him to the garden such as it was gone half to weed, and had him bring her anything green still growing, and he came back with a fist of wild onion and something that might have been sage, and she praised those too, and by the 3rd errand, the boy had stopped circling wide of her and had come to stand at her elbow, close, watching her hands. How'd you do that? He asked. He meant the jerky. She'd taken that black, near-inedible jerky and set it to soak in water she'd flavored, and it had softened and swelled and smelled of a sudden like a meal instead of leather. You want to know a secret, Thomas? She leaned down. There ain't much in this world so far gone it can't be brought back. Not meat, not vegetables, not people. Everything's got some good left in it if you know how to look and if you're willing to do the work of finding it. Most folks ain't willing. They see a thing looks used up and they throw it out. She straightened. Their loss, because used up things are grateful, and grateful things give you everything they got. The boy chewed on that. She could see him chewing on it. She wondered if he knew she wasn't only talking about the jerky. It was near dusk when Sarah Mitchell came. Evelyn heard the horse before the woman heard the hard, smart trot of an animal ridden by somebody with something to prove. She heard boots on the porch, sharp heels, and a woman's voice call out, "William," in the yard, and then getting no answer, the woman came to the one-lit window like a moth and stopped in the kitchen doorway, and Evelyn turned and got her first look at Sarah Mitchell. She was a handsome woman, near 40, dressed better than a ranch had any right to bring to its door, a traveling dress of good gray wool, a brooch at the throat, her fair hair pinned up under a hat that had cost somebody dear. She had a narrow, clever face, and she used it now to take Evelyn in top to bottom, and she was better at hiding her verdict than the wagon driver had been, but not so much better that Evelyn couldn't read it. "Well," Sarah said. "You'd be the new help." "Evelyn Harper, ma'am." She wiped her hands. "I'd shake your hand, but mine's covered in flour." "That's quite all right." Sarah did not offer her hand. She stepped into the kitchen and let her eyes travel over the work, the dough resting, the pot beginning to steam, the vegetables Evelyn had rescued now cut and glistening. "My brother hired you." "He's giving me a trial, ma'am. One meal." "A trial." Sarah's mouth curved. How enterprising of him. And how enterprising of the agent to send... She paused, and the pause was a whole sentence. "You." "He sent a cook," Evelyn said evenly. "Reckon we'll know by supper time if that's what he sent." Sarah drifted a step closer to the table. She looked down at the pot. And then she said the thing she'd come to say, said it light the way cruel women say the cruelest things, like it was only weather. "You know, Mrs. Harper, it is Mrs. It was, my husband passed. My condolences." Not a flicker. "You know this ranch was my sister-in-law's pride. Margaret, William's late wife. She was she was a jewel. Small thing, but she could work from dark to dark. Rode like a man. Kept this house like a picture. Everyone in 3 counties knew the Carter place, and they knew it for her." Sarah turned her clever face full on Evelyn. "A ranch like this needs a proper woman, Mrs. Harper. A woman who can be seen at church beside a man like William, and not..." Again the pause, the little knife slid, in slow. "Not draw the wrong sort of attention. You understand. I say it kindly. Woman to woman." The room with the thick walls opened its door. Evelyn put the words inside. "Shut it." "That's a real kind thing to tell a woman on her first day," Evelyn said. "Woman to woman." For half a second, Sarah's clever eyes narrowed, uncertain whether she'd been agreed with or struck. Then bootsteps came across the yard, and William filled the doorway behind his sister-in-law, and the whole air of the room changed. "Sarah," he said, not warm. "Didn't know you were coming out." "I heard you'd hired," Sarah said, turning all sweetness now. "Word does travel, William. I came to see how you were managing. The children. The house." She let her gaze slide once more to Evelyn and away. "I see you're managing." "We'll see how I'm managing after supper," William said. And Evelyn understood then that he was a fairer man than his sister-in-law, and a harder one, and that both of those things were about to be tested at his own table. "You're welcome to stay and eat if you've a mind. Everyone eats what the cook cooks tonight. That's the deal I struck." Sarah's smile tightened at the corners. "How democratic." "I believe I will stay. I confess I'm curious." "Then you'll want to wash up," Evelyn said, turning back to her pots. "Because it's near ready, and I don't hold a cold supper for anybody, even the curious." She heard William make a sound that might in another man have been the start of a laugh. They came in from the yard as the light went. 6 hands, and the foreman, big men with the day's dust on them, and their hats in their hands, and they came in loud and stopped when they saw her, and she felt every one of them make the calculation. She'd stopped counting how many rooms she'd walked into, and stopped a room cold. She didn't stop this one long. She set them to their bench with the flat authority of a woman who'd fed harder men than these, and she started laying it down. The bread came out first, risen high and golden from the flour they'd all written off, as ruined the smell of it filling the room, so that a young hand named Cole actually groaned out loud and got an elbow from his neighbor. Then the stew. She'd taken the black jerky and the sprouting onion and the eyes-like-knuckles potatoes and the browning cabbage, all of it, all the throwaway of that kitchen, and she'd built something from it that had no business smelling the way it smelled. She ladled it out. She set a bowl in front of each man. She set one before the foreman, a gray old cuss named Briggs, who'd been eyeing her the hardest, the one who'd clearly appointed himself judge. "Ma'am," Briggs said low, "no offense meant, but we've been eating this same jerky 3 weeks. I know what's in this house, and I'm telling you there ain't nothing in this house." "Eat first," Evelyn said. "Then tell me what ain't in this house." The whole table went quiet. 10 faces. Sarah Mitchell sitting straight-backed at the end with her hands in her lap, waiting. Evelyn understood, waiting for the failure she'd come all this way to witness. William standing by the wall with his arms crossed, not sitting because a man like him would want to be on his feet when he watched his gamble come in. And the two children. Thomas at the corner watching her. And a small girl Katie pressed to her brother's side, silent, 4 years old, and gone somewhere behind her eyes that a child ought not to have to go. Evelyn set a small bowl in front of the girl, blew on it first. Set it down gentle. "There now," she murmured only for the child. "You don't have to eat it if you don't want, but it's here if you get hungry. It'll wait for you. I made it patient." Old Briggs lifted his spoon. He looked at it like it might bite him. He put it in his mouth. The room watched the foreman chew. He set the spoon down. He was quiet a long moment. When he looked up, his weathered face had done something complicated, and his voice, when it came, was rougher than before. "Boys," Briggs said, "eat your supper." And they fell on it. Lord, how they fell on it. Spoons, scraping bread, torn and passed and torn again. A low murmur of astonishment, moving down the bench like wind through wheat. Cole went back for seconds before half the table had finished firsts. Somebody laughed an easy sound, a sound that hadn't lived in this house in a long while, and then somebody else laughed, and Evelyn stood at the head of it all with her hands folded in her apron, and watched hungry men remember they were happy. She did not look at William. She wanted to. She made herself not. She looked instead at the small girl in the corner who had picked up her spoon. Katie was watching her brother eat. And slow, so slow, the child dipped her spoon in the bowl Evelyn had made patient, and she brought it to her mouth, and she ate one bite, and then another, and the whole while her wide eyes stayed fixed on Evelyn's face, searching it the way children search a face for whether the world is safe. "That's good, ain't it?" Evelyn said to her quiet under the noise. "That's a good supper." Katie didn't answer. Katie didn't talk. Thomas had said not since. But the little girl nodded once small and went back to her bowl, and something in Evelyn's chest that had been clenched tight all that long day came loose all at once, so sudden and so fierce she had to turn to the stove and busy her hands, because a woman who cries where it can be seen gives folks a thing to use against her. And she would not. She would not. She would not. When she'd got herself in hand, she turned back and William Carter was looking at her. He'd uncrossed his arms. He stood there against the wall of his own loud, happy kitchen, and he was looking at her across all those bent heads and scraping spoons, and there was something in his face she couldn't name, because she'd never once had a man aim it at her before. It wasn't pity. It wasn't the cold auction block figuring from the road. It was closer to, she didn't have the word. Surprise, maybe. Surprise and something underneath the surprise, something that had gone still and startled, the way a man goes still when the ground he thought he knew shifts an inch beneath his boots. She held his gaze. She did not look away first. She'd learned long ago the great cost of looking away first. Down the table, Sarah Mitchell had not touched her bowl. Then Sarah touched her bowl. Just once. Just a spoonful brought up delicate to that clever mouth. And Evelyn watched the woman taste it, and watched the taste betray her. Watched Sarah Mitchell's fine face fight itself for one unguarded instant before she set the spoon down and folded her hands and composed herself back into judgment. "It's quite good," Sarah said to the room in a voice pitched to Carrie. "For what it is. Anyone can throw a pot together when they're hungry enough." She dabbed her mouth with 2 fingers. "The real test of a woman on a ranch isn't a single supper, William. It's a hard winter. It's a lost calf at 3 in the morning. It's whether she can keep up." She stood gathering her gloves. One good meal proves nothing but that she read the situation and cooked to it. I'd not be too quick to call it a hire. The laughter had gone out of the room. The men had heard. They kept their eyes on their bowls. "You're right, Sarah," William said. Evelyn felt the words like a hand laid flat against her chest. "One meal don't prove a winter." William went on slow, and he pushed off the wall, and he came into the middle of the room, and every man at the bench went quiet as church. "You're right about that. A winter's a winter, a lost calf's a lost calf. Can't nobody prove those things at a supper table." He stopped by the bench. He looked down at the empty bowls, the torn bread his men fed full for the first time in weeks. He looked at his son who had color in his face. He looked at his daughter, who was eating. "But you asked the wrong question, Sarah," William said. "You asked, can she keep up? That ain't the question I asked when I hired. I asked, can she cook? Can she keep a house? Can she mind my young ones?" He raised his eyes and found Evelyn where she stood. "I got my answer to 2 of those tonight, and I got a strong notion on the 3rd. And the winter well. Reckon we'll all find out about the winter together. Everybody does." "William." "She stays," William Carter said. The words dropped into the room and lay there. "On trial still," he added, and Evelyn heard him leave himself. "The room a hard man leaves himself, till I've seen more. But she stays past tonight. That much she earned. Any man at this table disagrees, he can say so now to my face and to hers." Not a man said a word. Old Briggs looked up from his bowl and met Evelyn's eyes and gave her one short nod, the whole of his opinion, and it was worth more than an hour of pretty speeches, and she knew it. Sarah Mitchell drew on her gloves one finger at a time. "Well," she said, "I can see my counsel isn't wanted tonight." She smiled, and the smile did not reach her clever eyes, and Evelyn understood with a cold certainty that this was not the end of Sarah Mitchell, but the beginning of her. "I'll come again when the house is quieter. William, children." Her gaze found Evelyn last and lingered and dropped once more top to bottom, that same slow inventory, before she turned for the door. "Mrs. Harper, enjoy your trial." Her sharp heels crossed the porch. Her horse trotted smart into the dark, and the kitchen let out its breath. The men drifted off to the bunkhouse by 1s and 2s, and each of them, Evelyn noticed, said something to her as he went. Nothing much. A mumbled "Ma'am. That was a fine supper." A rough "Thank you kindly" from young Cole, who looked like he might follow her home if she'd let him. And each small word was a stone laid in a foundation, and she took each one and set it careful in the room inside her, the good room, the one she kept for the rare days that gave her something to put there. She cleaned the kitchen down. Thomas helped her drying what she washed, and she let him, because a boy who helps is a boy who's decided to stay in the room with you, and that was worth more than the help. Katie had fallen asleep sitting up at the corner of the bench, spoon still in her small fist, and William came and gathered his daughter up against his shoulder, and the child didn't wake, only turned her face into his neck. He stood there a moment with his girl asleep on his shoulder, and his son at the sink, and this strange fat woman who'd fed his ranch on garbage, and Evelyn watched him not know what to say, watched a hard man reach for words he wasn't in the habit of using. "Mrs. Harper," he started. "Evelyn's fine," she said. "Or Mrs. Harper if it suits you better." "Either way." He nodded. He looked down at his sleeping daughter. When he spoke again it was quieter, and she understood he was saying more than the words said. "She ate," William said. "Katie. She ate the whole bowl. She—" He stopped. His jaw worked that same muscle in his cheek. "She ain't ate a full meal since her mama passed. Not once. We tried everything. Doctor come out from town, said just wait, said she'd eat when she got hungry enough." His voice roughened. "That was 4 months back." Evelyn dried her hands slow on her apron. "She wasn't waiting to get hungry," Evelyn said gently. "She was waiting to feel safe. Ain't the same thing. A hungry child'll still starve at a table where she don't feel safe. But you set food in front of a child and let her know down deep it'll wait on her, it won't be snatched. Nobody's going to make her cry over it or perform for it or earn it." She folded the towel. "She'll eat, when she's ready, in her own time. That's all I did. I made it patient." William Carter stood there in his kitchen with his sleeping daughter and looked at Evelyn Harper, and whatever had gone still and startled in his face at the supper table came back deeper now. "Who taught you that?" he said. "Not quite a question." "Grief did," Evelyn said simply. "Grief's a hard teacher, but she's thorough." He held her eyes a long moment. Then he nodded once and turned to carry his daughter to bed, and at the door he stopped his back to her and said the thing she would take upstairs and turn over in the dark of her little room. "I looked at you wrong out on that road," William said. "Down at your size before I looked at anything else. I want you to know I did it." A beat. "I ain't going to make a habit of it." And then he was gone up the stairs, careful with the sleeping child. And Evelyn Harper stood alone in the clean kitchen of the Carter Ranch on the first night of the rest of her life. and she pressed both hands flat to the work table and bowed her head. She let herself cry then. Just a little. Just where nobody could see. Not because they'd hurt her. She was used to being hurt. Hurt she could carry all day and never break a sweat. She cried because of the small girl who'd eaten. Because of the boy who'd dried the dishes. Because a hard man had said, "I looked at you wrong," and meant it. She cried because kindness, when it finally comes after you've gone so long without, doesn't feel like relief. It feels like a wound reopening. It feels like everything you had to make yourself stop wanting itself back into you all at once. She wiped her face on the corner of her apron. She banked the fire for morning. She looked around the kitchen, her kitchen now, at least for a while, at least on trial, and she squared her shoulders the way she'd squared them on the road that afternoon when the wagon left her in the dust. "All right," Evelyn Harper said to the empty room, quiet and steady, and certain the way a woman talks to herself when she's decided something she means to keep. "All right then, we'll show 'em." She took up her worn canvas bag and she climbed the stairs to her small room, and outside the summer dark lay warm and enormous over Montana, over the cattle and the drought-thirsty grass, and the town that had laughed at her, over all the hard road still ahead. And in the little room down the hall, a 4-year-old girl slept with a full belly for the first time in 4 months, and in the room beside it, a boy lay awake a while thinking about a woman who reached the high shelf without a stool, and in his own room, a big, lonely man lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and could not for the life of him stop seeing the way she'd lifted her chin on that road and said, "Just give me one chance." Evelyn set her bag down. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed, and for the first time in longer than she could rightly remember, she was somewhere that tomorrow would still want her there. It wasn't much. It was everything. She blew out the candle, and the Carter ranch went dark, and the long night held them all. Morning came before Evelyn was ready for it, the way mornings always did in a house that wanted watching. She was down the stairs and had the fire going before the first gray light touched the yard, and she was elbow deep in a bowl of dough when she heard the small sound behind her and turned to find Katie standing in the kitchen doorway in her nightgown, thumb in her mouth, watching. "Well, good morning," Evelyn said, easy, like a 4-year-old showing up before dawn was the most natural thing in the world. "You're up early. You come to help or you come to watch?" Katie didn't answer. Katie only watched. "Watching's fine," Evelyn said, turning back to her dough. "I did a powerful lot of watching when I was your age. That's how you learn a kitchen. You watch till your hands start itching to do it themselves." She worked the dough a moment. "You'll know when your hands start itching. Then you tell me, and I'll find you a job." She didn't push. She'd learned that pushing a frightened child was like pushing a frightened horse. You got yourself hurt, and the animal ran further off. So she let the little girl stand in the doorway, and she kept her own hands busy, and her own voice low and running, talking about nothing about the bread and the weather, and how you had to be gentle with dough, or it went tough on you. And slow, so slow, over the course of that long, quiet morning hour, Katie came 3 steps into the room. That was where Thomas found them when he thundered down the stairs, and he stopped dead at the sight of his sister standing in the kitchen. "Katie came down," he said, and there was something raw in his voice. "She never comes down. She stays in her room." "She came to watch me cook," Evelyn said. "Didn't you, Katie? We're old friends now." Thomas looked at his sister. Katie looked at the floor, and Evelyn watched the boy decide right there that whatever this fat woman was, she was doing something to his family, that 4 months of doctors and waiting hadn't done, and she watched him, not know what to do with that, and she took the pressure off him, the only way she knew. "Thomas Carter, are you going to stand there gawking, or are you going to eat?" "Because I made hotcakes, and they don't hold, and I don't cook twice for a slow boy." That got him moving. The men came in loud and hungry, and stopped being loud when they saw the table. She'd done something with the last of the good flour and the eggs Thomas had gathered, and a little of the wild honey Briggs had grudgingly admitted was in the cellar, and there were hot cakes stacked high, and a crock of it warm, and a pot of coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in, and old Briggs looked at the spread, and looked at her, and pushed his hat back off his forehead. "Ma'am," he said. I'm an old man, and I've been fed by a lot of cooks in my time and a lot of camps. And I want to say something, and I want to say it in front of everybody, so there ain't no mistaking it." The table went quiet. Evelyn braced. She'd been braced her whole life. Bracing was second nature. "I told you last night there weren't nothing in this house," Briggs said. "I was wrong. There was you in this house. And I'm too old to be too proud to say when I'm wrong." He picked up his fork. "Boys, we are lucky men this morning, and I don't want to hear one word of complaint out of any of you about anything ever again, long as this woman's doing the cooking. Now eat." And they ate, and there was laughter again, and Evelyn stood at the stove with her back to them, so they wouldn't see her face flipping hotcakes she didn't need to flip. That was the first day. There were others. William Carter watched her those first days. He didn't say much. She was learning he was a man who paid in deeds, not words that his whole vocabulary of caring was a language of doing. But she felt him watching, weighing, and she understood he was a fair man who'd been fooled by a good first impression before, and didn't mean to be fooled again. So she didn't try to charm him. She just worked. She scrubbed a kitchen that hadn't been properly scrubbed in a year down to the raw wood. She found the leak in the roof over the pantry that had been spoiling the flour, and she climbed up herself and patched it with pitch, before William could send a man, and when he came around the corner and found her up on the low roof, he stopped cold. "Mrs. Harper, get down off there before you break your neck." "I'm near done." "You are done. Get down." "Mr. Carter," Evelyn said, working the pitch into the seam, not looking at him. "If I get down every time a man tells me a woman my size oughtn't be up on a roof, I'll spend my whole life on the ground looking up at leaks that never get fixed. It's a small roof. I'm careful, and I've fixed more roofs than you'd credit." She smoothed the last of it and looked down at him, at his upturned face gone tight, with something that wasn't quite anger. "There. Your flour'll keep dry now. You can help me down if you're of a mind, or you can stand there worrying. Either way, it's fixed." He helped her down. His hands were sure and strong at her waist, and he set her on the ground like she weighed nothing at all. And for 1 second, they stood too close. And Evelyn stepped back first, because she always stepped back first, because a woman shaped like her who let herself want things got hurt, and she'd been hurt enough. "You didn't have to do that," William said. "The roof or the getting down?" "The roof. Somebody had to. You've got 100 things need doing and no time to do them, and no wife to—" She stopped herself. It was too close a thing to say. "You've got a lot on you," she finished. "I can see a man who's got a lot on him, so I'll take what I can off. That's the job. That's what a cook and a keeper of a house does when she's doing it right." William looked at her a long moment. "Margaret used to fix that roof," he said. It was the first time he'd said his dead wife's name to her. "She sounds like she was a fine woman," Evelyn said carefully. "She was." He looked off toward the hills. "Everybody says so. My sister-in-law reminds me of it regular." His jaw worked. "Truth is, she was a fine woman and a hard one, and she loved this ranch more than—" He stopped. Some things a man doesn't say even when they're true, especially when they're true. "She loved this ranch," he said instead. "I want the children to remember her right." "Then help them remember her right," Evelyn said. "But don't make them carry her death, William. That's too heavy for young shoulders. Katie's carrying it. You can see she is. A child that stops talking stops eating. She's not grieving. She's drowning, and she's too little to know the difference or call for help." Evelyn softened her voice. "You give a child a dead mother to carry and no living arms to rest in, you'll lose her too. Different kind of losing, slower, but you'll lose her all the same." William turned and stared at her, and whatever he'd been about to say died on his lips, because just then Sarah Mitchell's smart-trotting horse came up the road. She came near every day that first week, Sarah did. She'd ride out from town with some reason, a jar of preserves, a message, a concern about the children's schooling. And every reason was a lie, and under every lie was the same true thing, which was that Sarah Mitchell had appointed herself the guardian of her dead sister-in-law's memory and the keeper of what a proper Carter woman ought to be, and she had looked at Evelyn Harper and seen everything that a proper Carter woman was not. "You've let the boy get familiar with her," Sarah said to William on the fourth day, low in the yard, not low enough. "He calls her by her Christian name. Margaret would never have permitted it." "Margaret's not here to permit or not permit," William said. "No, she isn't. Which is exactly why you need someone looking out for her interests. Her children's interests." Sarah drew off her gloves. "Do you know what they're saying in town, William?" "I don't much care what they're saying in town." "Well, you ought to, because they're saying the widower Carter's taken up with a fat charity case the labor agent couldn't unload anywhere else. They're saying she's got no people, no references, anyone can find, no husband, anyone in this territory ever met. They're saying you'll marry her out of desperation because no proper woman will have a man with 2 ruined children and a failing ranch." Sarah let that sit. "They're saying you've lost your judgment along with your wife. I'm only telling you what I hear, because I love you and I loved my sister and I won't stand by and watch her memory made a laughingstock." Evelyn heard all of it. She was at the open window not 10 feet away, and Sarah knew it and had pitched every word to Carrie. And Evelyn stood there with a wooden spoon gone still in her hand, and let the words go into the room inside her, into the room with the thick walls, and she found that room getting crowded. She waited for William to answer. She hated herself for how much she waited. "Anything else, Sarah?" was all he said. "That's all, for now." "Then good day to you." And Sarah rode off, and William came into the kitchen a while later, and he didn't say anything about it, and neither did Evelyn. And the not saying sat between them the rest of the day, like a third person at the table. It was the children who saved that week from souring the children who kept her feet under her, when the town's whispers came drifting out to the ranch on Sarah Mitchell's smart-trotting horse. Because Katie was talking now. It happened on the 6th day, and it happened over a chicken. There was a hen, a mean old thing half wild that had escaped the coop and taken to roosting in the rafters of the barn where nobody could reach her, and she'd been laying her eggs up there, where they did nobody any good, and Briggs had wanted to shoot her for weeks. And Evelyn, hanging wash in the yard, watched that hen come strutting out into the open, and she watched little Katie, who followed Evelyn everywhere, now silent as a shadow, go still in point. "There she is," Evelyn said. "The outlaw, Miss Cluck herself." And Katie laughed. It wasn't much of a laugh. It was rusty and small. The laugh of a mouth that had forgotten how, and it stopped almost the second it started, like the child had surprised herself and gone shy of the sound. But it was a laugh, and Evelyn dropped the wet sheet she was hanging, and got down on her knees in the dirt so fast her joints complained, and she took Katie by both small shoulders, and she said, "What did you say her name was?" Katie looked at her wide-eyed. "Her name," Evelyn said, gentle, desperate, careful as a woman crossing thin ice with something precious in her arms. "The outlaw hen." "What's her name, Katie?" "You tell me, and I'll write it on the coop so everybody knows." And Katie, 4 years old, silent, 4 months, opened her mouth and said in a voice like a door creaking open after a long winter, "Miss Cluck." 2 words, 2 whole words. 2. "Miss Cluck." Evelyn repeated, and her voice broke clean in half. "That's the finest name I ever heard. That's exactly her name. Katie. That's—" And she couldn't finish. She just pulled the little girl into her arms and held her. And Katie let herself be held, and over the child's shoulder, Evelyn saw Thomas standing frozen in the barn door, and she saw the boy's face crumple, and she held out one arm. And Thomas Carter, who was too old to cry and too proud to run, came running across that yard and hit her so hard he near knocked her over and buried his face against her and shook. That was how William found them. His son and his daughter both wrapped up in the arms of a fat woman kneeling in the dust, and his daughter saying over and over into Evelyn's neck, "Miss Cluck, Miss Cluck." And Evelyn Harper crying, like her heart had broken and mended in the same breath. William Carter stood there, and he did not move, and he did not speak. And when Evelyn finally looked up and met his eyes over the heads of his weeping children, she saw that the hard man had a wet face too, and that he'd turned half away so his men wouldn't see it, and that he was losing that particular battle badly. He crossed the yard. He knelt down in the dust beside them, this big proud rancher on his knees in his own yard, and he put his arms around all 3 of them. At once, his son and his daughter, and the stranger who'd given his daughter back her voice, and for a long moment the four of them just held on in the dirt, while the wash flapped on the line, and the outlaw hens strutted, and the whole hard summer held its breath. She said her name. William said, wrecked. Katie, you said her name. Miss Cluck, Katie told her father, and reached out and patted his wet cheek. Don't cry, Papa. And the big man made a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob, and pressed his daughter's small hand to his face and held it there. And Evelyn Harper kneeling in the dirt with this broken family remaking itself around her, understood that she had just crossed a line she could not uncross, that she had gone and let herself love these people, and that loving people was the most dangerous thing a woman like her could do, and that it was too late. Now it was already done. She had already done it. She should have known that was exactly the moment for the roof to fall in. It fell in the shape of a letter. It came 3 days later, carried out from town by the boy who did such errands, and it was addressed to William Carter. In a hand Evelyn didn't recognize, and she watched him read it, standing in the yard, and she watched his face change, and she knew before he said a word that something had reached out from her past and found her. Mrs. Harper, William said, and his voice had gone flat and careful, and it was the voice from the road, the auction block voice, and hearing it again after all these good days was like a bucket of cold well water down her spine. Come inside a minute. There's something I need to ask you. She dried her hands. She followed him in. Her heart was going hard. This letter's from the labor agent in town, William said, laying it on the table between them. The one that hired you out to me. He heard I kept you on. And he thought, being an honest man, he says that I ought to know some things about you that maybe didn't make it into your references. He looked at her steady. Before I read it, I'm going to give you the chance to tell me yourself, whatever it is. Because I've watched you 2 weeks now, and I've seen what you did for my girl, and I'd rather hear it from your own mouth than from a stranger's letter. Evelyn's hands were folded in her apron. The room inside her was very full and very quiet. What does it say? She asked. I'm asking you to tell me before I read it. And I'm asking you what it says, Mr. Carter, because a woman like me learns real quick that the truth of her life and the story told about her life are two different things, and I'd like to know which one I'm defending myself against. Her voice was steady. She was proud of how steady it was. So read it, or tell me what's in it. But don't ask me to guess which of my sins a stranger decided to sell you. I've got too many to guess right, and not near so many as folks like to say. William held her eyes a moment. Then he picked up the letter and he read it out. It said that Evelyn Harper's references were false. That the family she'd claimed to cook for the fine household in Missouri, 3 years of service, had no record of her. That she'd been let go from her last 2 positions. That in one town, she'd been run off after a family's silver went missing, though nothing was ever proved. That she was the agent, wrote a woman who left trouble behind her wherever she went, and that a widower with young children ought to know what he'd brought under his roof. The letter finished. The kitchen was silent. Now, William said, setting it down. I'll hear your side. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was very low. The silver's true, she said. She saw it land on him. Saw him brace. A family in Kansas, the Prescotts. Their silver went missing, and I was the cook, and I was... She gestured at herself, at her body. I was the easiest one to blame. The one nobody'd defend. The one folks already looked at sideways. So when the silver went, everybody knew who took it, because everybody already knew what I was, and what I was a woman too big and too poor and too alone to be anything but guilty. She lifted her chin. I didn't take it. It turned up 8 months later behind a loose board in the eldest son's room where he'd hid it to sell for gambling debts. I know that because a friend still worked in the house and wrote to tell me. By then, I was 3 towns gone, and my name was already ruined, and there wasn't any letter the Prescotts could write that'd catch up to the story that had already run ahead of me. She swallowed. So yes, I got run out of a town over silver I never touched. That part of the letter's true, in the way a thing can be true and be a lie at the same time. And the references, false, every one. She said it flat, no flinching. You want to know why a woman fakes her references, Mr. Carter? Because after the Prescotts, no honest reference would have me. Because the truth of me, a good cook, a hard worker, an honest woman, the truth of me couldn't get me hired because it came attached to a name 3 counties had learned to spit. So I made up a family in Missouri. I made up 3 good years. I made up a woman folks would hire because the real woman, the honest one, couldn't get through a single door. Her voice cracked just once, and she mastered it. I lied to get the chance to prove I didn't need to lie. That's the whole ugly truth of it. I faked a paper so I could stand in a real kitchen and cook a real supper and let the food tell you what no reference would. And it worked. You saw it work. Your daughter's saying words again because I lied my way to your door. She stopped. She had never said all of it out loud to anyone. It had cost her more than the roof. I'll pack my bag, she said. You don't owe me a thing. A man's got a right to know who's under his roof with his children, and you asked me plain. And I told you plain, and that's more than most folks ever gave me the chance to do. I'll be gone within the hour. She turned to go. Sit down, William said. She stopped. I said, sit down, Mrs. Harper, please. She sat. William Carter picked up the letter. He looked at it a long moment. And then deliberately he crossed to the stove, and he opened the firebox, and he fed the letter to the flames and watched it burn. Mr. Carter, I told you the day you came, William said, watching the paper curl and blacken, that I looked at you wrong on that road, down at your size before I looked at anything else. He shut the firebox. He turned to face her. I told you I wasn't going to make a habit of it. Well, a man that would take a stranger's letter over 2 weeks of his own 2 eyes, that's a man making a habit of looking at folks wrong, judging the outside, believing the story instead of the person. He shook his head slow. I did that to you once on the road. I'm not doing it twice. I watched you climb a roof to save my flower. I watched you give my boy back his appetite and my girl back her voice. I don't need a paper from Missouri to tell me who you are. You've been telling me who you are every single day with your hands at my table, and I believe my table over any letter. Evelyn stared at him. Something enormous was breaking loose in her chest. Something that had been chained down so long she'd forgotten the shape of it. You don't know that I'm telling the truth, she said, because she had to, because she couldn't let a man be kind to her on a lie. About the silver. You've got no way to know I didn't take it. All you've got is my word, and my word's the word of a woman who just admitted she forges references. That's right, William said. All I've got is your word. He held her eyes. And I've decided your word's good. That's my right, ain't it? To decide you gave me the honest thing when you could have given me a pretty lie, and you gave it to me knowing it might put you back on that road. A guilty woman lies to keep her place. An honest one tells the truth even when the truth costs her everything. He nodded once like a man closing an account. You told me the truth. That's my proof. Now let's not speak of it again. And that should have been the end of it. But of course, it wasn't, because Sarah Mitchell had a friend at the labor agent's office, and Sarah Mitchell had helped write that letter, and Sarah Mitchell had not ridden all this way this particular morning to deliver preserves. She came in without knocking the way she always did, and she stopped in the kitchen doorway, and she looked from William's face to Evelyn's and back, and Evelyn watched the woman read the room and understand with a flash of real fury that the letter had already been read and burned, and had not done what it was sent to do. So, Sarah said. He told you. Good. Then you'll be leaving. She's staying, Sarah. William said, tired. Staying? Sarah came into the room, and the sweetness was gone from her, now all of it, and what was left was something colder and harder and more honest. William, that woman is a thief and a liar. It's in writing, from the agent himself. She forged her way into your home. She's got your children calling her by her Christian name and your men eating out of her hand, and now she's got you defending her over your own family's memory, and you call it staying. She turned on Evelyn. What is it you want exactly? Because I've watched women like you before. Women with nothing who find a lonely man with something and who make themselves so useful, so sweet, so needed, that by the time he sees clear, It's too late, and they've got their claws in his land and his children and his name. Is that it? Is that the game? Sarah, that's enough. No, it is not enough. Somebody in this family has to say what needs saying while there's still time to say it. Sarah stepped closer to Evelyn and dropped her voice and said the cruelest, true thing yet, the thing she'd clearly been saving. You think he's kind. You think he sees you. But look at yourself. Look at what you are. A man like William Carter doesn't marry a woman shaped like you for love. If it ever comes to marriage, and God help us, I pray it doesn't, it'll be because he's desperate and you're convenient, and every soul in this territory will know it, and they'll pity him for it, and they'll laugh at him behind his back at church and your children. She flung the word at William. Your children will grow up hearing that their father settled for the fat charity woman because no proper lady would have him. Is that the mother you want for Margaret's children? Is that the legacy you want for your name? The kitchen rang with it. And Evelyn Harper, who had spent her whole life putting cruel words into the room with the thick walls, found that the room was full, that there was no more space in it, that she'd been swallowing this exact poison her entire life. And she could not swallow one more drop of it, and something in her that had bent and bent and bent for 32 years finally quietly refused to bend any further. She stood up. "Ma'am," Evelyn said, and her voice was not loud, but it stopped Sarah Mitchell cold. "I have listened to you for 2 weeks. I've served you at this table and held my tongue while you sharpened yours on me, because you're this family's blood, and I'm the hired help, and I know my place. I've had it taught to me my whole life, but I'm going to say some things now, and you're going to hear them because I've earned the right to be heard in this kitchen, if I've earned anything at all." Sarah opened her mouth. "No," Evelyn said. "You had your say. Now I'll have mine." And Sarah Mitchell, to her own evident astonishment, closed her mouth. "You're right about one thing," Evelyn said. "A man like William Carter out in the world don't marry a woman shaped like me for love. You're right. That's how the world's built. I know it better than you ever could, because I've lived inside this body every single day of my life, and I've watched every door in the world weigh me at a glance and find me wanting. And I have never once been given the thing a pretty woman gets handed free the day she's born, which is the benefit of the doubt." Her voice was steady and terrible. "You've never had a soul look at you and decide what you were before you opened your mouth. I have, every day. So don't you dare stand in this kitchen and tell me what the world thinks of a woman like me. I could teach you things about it that'd curl your hair." Sarah had gone pale. "But here's what you got wrong," Evelyn went on. "You think I'm after his land, his name, his children, like there's something to steal. Ma'am, I don't want to take one thing from this family. I want to give. That's the difference between you and me that you're too frightened to see. You came out here to protect Margaret's memory, but all you've done is guard it like a jealous dog guards a bone, snarling at everybody who comes near, until the memory of a fine woman's turned into a stick you beat the living with. That's not honoring her. That's using her." She took a breath. "I didn't come to replace Margaret Carter. Nobody could and nobody should. I came because a labor agent needed to unload me and a widower needed a cook, and it was the last door in the world that hadn't shut in my face. That's all it was. But I stayed. I stayed because a little girl who hadn't eaten in 4 months ate my supper, and a little boy who hadn't cried in front of anybody cried in my arms. And if you think I'd walk away from those children to spare this territory, the trouble of gossiping about my waistline, then you don't know the first thing about me, and you don't know the first thing about love. And I feel sorry for you, ma'am. I do, because a woman who measures worth in waistlines is going to die never once having tasted the best thing life's got to offer." The silence after was total. William Carter was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. Thomas had appeared in the doorway, drawn by the voices, and stood frozen. And little Katie behind him peeked out with her thumb in her mouth and her eyes huge. Sarah Mitchell drew herself up. 2 spots of color burned high on her clever face. And when she spoke, her voice shook, and Evelyn understood she'd struck something real. Something under all that fine wool and cold judgment, some old wound of Sarah's own. "You'll regret speaking to me that way," Sarah said. "I promise you that. I have friends in this territory, real friends with real standing, and I will not, I will not stand by while my sister's home is handed to a fat thieving nobody who talks above her station." She turned to William, and her voice cracked. "You'll choose William. Do you hear me? Before the summer's out, you'll have to choose between this woman and your own family, between a stranger and your sister's memory. And when you choose wrong, and you will, I can see already you will. Don't you come to me. Don't you dare come to me when it all falls down." She swept out. Her sharp heels struck the porch like hammer blows. Her horse tore off down the road at a dead gallop, and the dust of it hung in the summer air a long time after she was gone. Nobody in the kitchen moved. Then Katie let go of the doorframe and crossed the whole room past her father, past her brother, and she came to Evelyn and lifted up both arms to be held, and Evelyn bent and picked her up, and the little girl put her face in Evelyn's neck and said muffled fierce, 4 years old, and certain, "I don't like that lady, I like you." And Evelyn Harper, holding the child, looked at William Carter over Katie's small shoulder, and she did not know what she saw in his face, only that it was not the road, not the auction block, not the flat, careful voice of a man reading a letter. It was something that had made up its mind. Something that scared her more than all of Sarah Mitchell's threats because it was warm and she did not know how to defend herself against warm. She'd built a whole life's worth of walls against cruelty. She'd never once had to build one against being wanted. "Thomas?" William said quietly, not taking his eyes off Evelyn. "Take your sister on out to see about Miss Cluck. Go on now. I need a word with Mrs. Harper." Thomas looked between the two grown-ups. Something in a child's quick way told him this was important, and he reached up and took Katie from Evelyn's arms. The little girl went to him easy, and he carried his sister out toward the barn, glancing back once at the door. Then it was just the two of them in the kitchen, where all the shouting had been. "You didn't have to defend yourself to her," William said. "This is my house. Her opinion of who I keep in it don't signify." "It signifies to you," Evelyn said. "Don't tell me it doesn't. She's your dead wife's sister. She's blood. She's the tie to Margaret, to the children's grandmother's people, to your whole standing in this county. When she says the town's laughing at you, that lands because part of you's afraid it's true." She wiped her hands on her apron, a nervous gesture, the first nervous thing she'd let him see. "I'm not a fool, Mr. Carter. I know exactly what I cost a man. I've always known. A woman like me does the arithmetic of herself every single morning. I'm a fine cook and a hard worker, and I'll be good to your children till my dying day. And against all that, on the other side of the ledger, is that folks will laugh at you for keeping me. And I can't fix that side. I've tried my whole life to fix it, and it won't be fixed. So the least I can do is not pretend it isn't there." "Stop," William said. "Stop what?" "Stop doing the arithmetic of yourself." He crossed the room to her, closer than the roof, and this time she couldn't step back because the work table was behind her. "I've been standing here 2 weeks watching you tally yourself up, like you're goods at market, like your whole worth is a sum a stranger can add up at a glance, and I'm about sick of it, Mrs. Harper. I'm about sick to death of it, because I've got 2 eyes, and I've been using them, and the woman I've been watching don't add up to anything so small as a number some fool in town could reckon." His voice had gone rough. "You gave my girl her voice. You gave my boy back his heart. You climbed my roof and told my sister-in-law the truth to her face, and you did it all while carrying a hurt so old and so deep I can see it on you like a scar even when you're smiling. And you think the story of you is your waistline." He shook his head. "The story of you is the bravest thing I ever saw walk up my road. And I'll be damned before I let Sarah Mitchell or the town or you yourself tell me different." Evelyn Harper could not breathe. Nobody had ever said such things to her. Nobody. Not her dead husband, who'd been kind but tired and worn thin by their poverty, and had loved her the way you love a comfortable chair. Not one soul in 32 years had ever stood in front of her and told her she was brave, that she was more than the sum some stranger could reckon at a glance, and she found that she had no wall for this, that all her walls faced the other way, that she was standing here completely undefended in front of the one weapon she'd never learned to guard against, which was a good man telling her the truth. "You shouldn't say things like that to me," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because I'll believe them." Her voice broke all the way. Because I've spent my whole life making myself not want things I can't have, and I'm good at it. I'm the best there is at it. And you're standing there undoing 32 years of that in about 30 seconds, and I don't. William, I don't know how to want something and survive not getting it. Not anymore. I used up all my surviving getting this far. So please, please, if you don't mean it, if this is pity or gratitude or loneliness, or a man who lost his wife reaching for the nearest warm thing, you tell me now, and I'll go back to being your cook, and I'll never speak of it, and I'll cook your suppers and love your babies and keep every wall I've got right where it belongs. But don't you make me want this and then take it. I've had things taken. I know how it goes. I'd rather never have it than have it and lose it. So be sure. For God's sake, be sure before you say one more word. William Carter looked at her. And whatever he was going to say, whatever the answer was, the answer she'd waited her whole starved life to hear, or dreaded her whole armored life to be denied, she didn't get to hear it. Because in that exact moment, out in the yard, one of the hands started shouting, and the shouting had the particular ragged edge that men's voices only got for two things: fire or death. And William's head snapped up, and Evelyn's heart dropped clean through the floor. "Boss, boss!" It was young Cole, and his voice cracked with terror. "Boss, you gotta come. It's the cattle, the whole north herd. Boss, come quick. There's something bad wrong. Oh God, boss, there's dead ones. There's dead ones everywhere." William was moving before the boy finished out the door at a dead run, and Evelyn ran to the door behind him, and she looked out across the yard to where Cole stood pointing north with his hat gone and his face white as milk, and she saw William reach the boy and grab him by the shoulders. And she saw the boy say something, and she saw William Carter, hard, unshakable. William Carter, who'd buried a wife and run this ranch alone through drought and grief, and never once bent. She saw his whole body go rigid, like he'd been struck, and then his knees buckle just slightly, just for a second before he caught himself. And Evelyn Harper stood in the doorway with the summer sun beating down, and her heart still pounding from words unsaid, and she understood cold and certain that whatever had just happened to the North herd was going to decide everything. The ranch, the children, the town's whispers. Sarah Mitchell's promise that it would all come falling down, and that the falling down had just begun. The North pasture told a story no man wanted to read. William reached it first, running the whole way with Evelyn a dozen steps behind him, because she would not stay in that kitchen. Not with his knees buckling in the yard, not with young Cole white as a corpse. And when she came up over the rise, she stopped, and she pressed her hand to her mouth, because there in the grass lay 11 head of cattle, dead bloated already in the summer heat, and around them a scatter of others down, but not gone, heaving foam at their mouths, eyes rolling. "No," William said, "just that. No, no, no." He went from beast to beast. He knelt by each one. He was a cattleman to the bone, and Evelyn watched him read the bodies like a doctor reads a patient, and she watched the reading tell him something that put a gray cast under his sunburned skin. "Briggs," he called, and the old foreman came at a run and knelt by him, and the two men bent their heads together over a dead cow's muzzle, and Evelyn saw Briggs's face fall. "It's the water," Briggs said. "Ain't it? It's the water. The North tank. The North tank." William stood up slow like a man twice his age. "Something's fouled it. Poison or bad runoff, or a dead thing rotted in it, I don't know. But they drank it and it killed 'em. And every head that watered there this morning is either dead or dyin'." He turned in a slow circle counting the bodies, and Evelyn watched the number climb behind his eyes. "That's near a third of the herd waters north this time of year, in the drought, because the North tank's the only one still holding. Then we move 'em," Briggs said. "Move the rest off it now before—" "Move 'em where Briggs—" And there was a terrible flatness in William's voice. "The creek's dry. The South tank's near dry. The North tank's the water. It's the only water, and it's killing them." He looked out over his dying cattle in the killing sun. "We moved the herd off the one water we got left in the middle of the worst drought in 10 years, and they die of thirst instead of poison. That's the choice. That's the whole choice." Nobody said anything. The cattle groaned in the grass. And Evelyn Harper, who knew nothing of cattle, but knew a great deal about ruin, stepped forward. "How long," she said, "does a beast that drank it take to die?" The men looked at her. Briggs opened his mouth to tell her this was no place for the cook, and William held up a hand and stopped him. "Few hours," William said. "The ones that drank deep went first. Some of these been down since dawn. And the ones that only drank a little. The ones still standing. Might live, might not. Depends how much they took. Then it matters how much they took," Evelyn said, thinking fast, her mind moving the way it moved in a kitchen when the flour was short and 10 men were hungry and the meal had to come from nothing. "It matters when they drank and how deep, which means it matters that you don't let one more head near that tank, not one more mouthful starting this second. Fence it, rope it, post a man on it with a gun if you have to. Because right now every hour you keep them off it is a beast that maybe lives." She turned to Briggs. "You said move the herd. He's right, you can't move them far with no water. But you don't have to move them far. You have to move them off the poison and get clean water into the ones that can still be saved. How much water can this ranch put its hands on that you know is clean right now? Today, every barrel, every well, every trough." Briggs blinked at her. Then, despite everything, the old foreman's mouth twitched. That's the right question, ma'am. That's exactly the right question." He turned to William. "The house well's clean, the kitchen cistern. There's the old hand-dug well by the south line shack. We don't use it 'cause it's slow, but it's clean and it's cold. If we hauled—" "We can't haul enough water by hand to keep 100 head alive," William said. "No," Evelyn agreed. "You can't keep 100 alive. But you're not trying to keep 100 alive, Mr. Carter. You already lost the ones that drank deep. You're trying to keep alive the ones on the edge, the ones that took a little and might tip either way. And that's not 100. That's maybe 20, 30. And 30 head watered careful by hand from clean wells for 2-3 days, till you sort out the tank. 30 head a family can haul water for, if every soul on this ranch hauls and nobody sleeps." She looked at him steady. "I've fed 10 men on a handful of scraps, Mr. Carter. I know how to make a little go a long way when a little is all there is. Let me help you make this little go a long way. Tell me where to haul, and I'll haul till my arms give out." William Carter looked at the fat cook standing in his poisoned pasture, telling him how to save his herd, and something moved in his face, and Briggs was already nodding, already turning to shout for the hands. "Cole, take Deacon and a string rope round that tank every side, and you keep the herd off it if you got to fire over their heads. Marsh Toomey with me. We're cutting the standing ones out from the dead and driving 'em slow to the south flat. Everybody else on water barrels, buckets, the wagon tank. Everything that holds a drop we're hauling from the house, well, and the south shack, and we ain't stopping." He wheeled on Evelyn. "Ma'am, you know how much a sick beast ought to drink, and how often—" "No," Evelyn said. "But you do. So you tell me the amount and the timing, and I'll set up the hauling like I'd set up a kitchen feeding 40, and I'll keep every barrel moving and every soul working, and I'll make sure not one drop's wasted and not one beast gets missed. You run the cattle, Mr. Carter. Let me run the water." And that, in the end, was how Evelyn Harper came to run a cattle rescue from the seat of a water wagon, hollering orders to grown men twice her size, who took them without a word of complaint. Because inside of an hour, it was plain she was the only one keeping the whole desperate scramble from flying apart. They worked through the killing heat of the day. They worked past dark. Evelyn hauled water till the rope handles of the buckets cut bloody lines across her palms, and she wrapped them in strips of her own apron and hauled more. She organized the children too. Thomas ran messages between the wells and the flat, and even little Katie carried a tin cup back and forth to the men, grave and important with her small task. And Evelyn cooked besides, because men hauling water in that heat had to eat or they'd drop, and so she'd run from the water line to the kitchen and back, feeding the rescue with one hand and running it with the other. Near midnight, William found her at the south well, hauling in the dark by lantern light, and he took the bucket out of her cut hands. "Stop," he said. "You've done enough. You've done more than enough. Your hands are bleeding through the rags." "How many did we lose?" she said, not letting go of the rope. 14 dead, but Evelyn, the standing ones. The 30 on the edge. His voice was hoarse with exhaustion, and something underneath the exhaustion. We haven't lost one since noon. Not one. They're drinking clean, and they're holding. Briggs says, if we make it to morning without losing more, most of them pull through. He took the rope gently out of her hands. You did that. Your fool idea about the little going a long way. You saved 30 head of cattle today. Mrs. Harper, and 30 head is the difference between a ranch that limps through this drought and a ranch that goes under. You know that you saved this place today. A cook saved a cattle ranch. Evelyn swayed on her feet. She'd been going since before dawn, and it was near midnight, and she'd wept over a hen, and defended herself against Sarah, and hauled water till she bled. And it all came up on her at once, and she might have gone down if William hadn't caught her one arm around her back holding her up. I got you, he said. Lord, woman, you don't ever stop, do you? I got you. Lean on me a minute. Just a minute. Nobody's watching. Lean on me. And Evelyn Harper, who never leaned, who'd never once in her adult life let herself go soft against another person, because soft was where they got you leaned. She let her weight go against his chest, all of it. The weight the whole world had mocked her for, and William Carter took it like it was nothing, held her up easy and sure, and she felt his heart going hard under her cheek, and she thought distantly through the exhaustion that she'd never once been held up before. She'd held everyone. She'd never once been held. We never finished, she murmured. In the kitchen, before Cole came. You were going to say something and I was scared to hear it. I remember. Are you still going to say it? William was quiet a moment, his arm firm around her in the dark. Not tonight, he said. Not with you half dead on your feet, and my herd still hanging by a thread and both of us stinking of well water. When I say it, Evelyn, I want you standing on your own 2 feet, clear-eyed, nothing else going wrong for 10 miles around. I want you to know I mean it, and not that I'm reaching for you 'cause it's midnight and we near lost everything. You told me to be sure. I'm being sure. So I'll say it when it's right, and you'll know it's right. Until then, you'll just have to wonder. She heard the exhausted smile in his voice. Serves you right, scaring me half to death fainting at a well. She laughed. It surprised them both. They got through the night. They lost 2 more before dawn, but they saved 28, and when the sun came up on the ranch, it came up on a family and a crew who'd worked themselves past the end of their strength and won something out of it, and there was a rough, exhausted joy in the yard that morning that Evelyn would remember all her life. Even Briggs, who did not hand out approval, stopped by the kitchen where she stood swaying over a skillet on no sleep at all, and he took off his hat and he said, Ma'am, I've been on ranches 40 years. I never seen the like of what you did yesterday. You give the orders and grown men jumped and they was right too. I'd ride the river with you any day. That's the highest thing a cattleman can say about a body, and I'm saying it to a cook, and I mean every word. And he put his hat back on and walked out before she could answer, which was a mercy because she couldn't have. But the tank was still poisoned, and the how of it was still a mystery, and it was William who found the answer 2 days later, and the finding of it changed everything. He came into the kitchen white-faced and set something on the table in front of her. A twist of paper, and inside it a greenish-white powder. You know what this is? He asked. No, it's rat poison. Arsenic, the kind the feed store in town sells for the granaries. His voice was very controlled, and the control was worse than shouting. I found the sack it came from tucked in the rocks above the north tank up on the ledge where the runoff feeds in. Somebody carried it up there and poured it in where the water'd carry it down to the herd. This wasn't bad runoff, Evelyn. This wasn't a dead thing rotted in the tank. Somebody poisoned my cattle. On purpose. Somebody walked onto my land and murdered 14 head and tried to break this ranch. The kitchen went very still. Who? Evelyn said. That's what I aim to find out. William's jaw was set like stone. But I'll tell you what I already know. Whoever did it knew which tank the north herd waters in the drought. Knew the ledge above it feeds the runoff. Knew this ranch, Evelyn. Knew it well. This wasn't some drifter. This was somebody who's been here. Somebody who knows how we run things." His eyes came up to hers, and there was a terrible question in them, and she understood the question, and it made her sick. "You think it's me," she said quietly. "I didn't say that. You don't have to say it. I can see it moving behind your eyes, and I don't blame you for it. It's what everybody'd think. The stranger. The woman with the false references and the silver in her past. It'd be the easiest thing in the world to hang this on me, and Sarah'd have the whole town believing it by Sunday." She stood up. "So, let's have it out right now in the light, the two of us, before it festers. Ask me. Ask me straight if I poisoned your cattle, and look at my face when I answer, and then you'll know the same way you knew about the silver." William Carter looked at her a long, long moment. "Did you poison my cattle, Evelyn Harper?" "No," she said, clear, steady, meeting his eyes dead on. "I did not. I've done a lot of hard things to survive, William. I've forged a paper, and I've told lies, and I've stolen bread more than once when I was starving and not ashamed of it. But I have never in my life harmed a living creature that didn't threaten me, and I would sooner cut off my own hand than hurt this ranch, or these children, or you. That's God's truth. Believe it or don't. But that's the truth, and it's the only answer I've got." And William Carter nodded slow, and the terrible question went out of his eyes, and he said, "I believe you." And Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "But somebody did it," she said. "And if it wasn't me and it wasn't a stranger, then it was somebody who knows this ranch. And you already know who that is, William. You've known since you found the sack. You just don't want to say it because saying it means it's true." He didn't answer, but his silence answered for him. "When did Sarah last ride out here before the poisoning?" Evelyn asked gently. "Don't. The morning of the letter. She was here the morning the cattle died. She rode off at a gallop, furious, and she promised you heard her." "William, we both heard her. She promised it would all come falling down before summer's out. And 2 days later, your herd's poisoned with feed store arsenic by somebody who knows exactly which tank to foul." Evelyn kept her voice soft, because she could see what this was costing him. "I'm not saying it to hurt you. She's your children's kin. But you asked who knew this ranch, and there's your answer, and it's been standing in front of you the whole time in a good gray wool dress. Sarah is a hard woman, and a proud one, and she's got no love for you," William said, and every word came out like it was pulled with pliers. "But poison cattle, kill 14, head threaten the whole place, put Margaret's own nieces and nephews' futures at risk just to run off a cook, Evelyn. That's no. No. She loved Margaret. She loves these children. She wouldn't. Wouldn't she?" Evelyn said. "Or wouldn't she think of it as saving them? People who do terrible things. William, most of them don't think they're doing terrible things. They think they're doing the hard, necessary thing that nobody else has the stomach for. I'd bet my life Sarah Mitchell doesn't think of herself as a woman who'd poison cattle. I'd bet she thinks of herself as a woman protecting her dead sister's legacy from a thieving fat interloper by whatever means the good Lord makes available." Evelyn shook her head. "That's what makes her dangerous. Not that she's wicked, that she's certain she's righteous." William sat down heavily at the table and put his face in his hands. "If it's true," he said, muffled, "if I go accusing my dead wife's sister of poisoning my herd and I'm wrong, I lose the children's grandparents' people. I lose Margaret's whole family. I split this county down the middle, and every soul in it takes a side, and the side they take won't be mine. It'll be the fine, respectable Mitchells over the widower who took up with a—" He stopped. "And if it's true, and I don't go after her, then I've got a woman who poisons cattle riding onto my land whenever she pleases near my children, and next time it might not be cattle." "Yes," Evelyn said quietly. "That's the whole of it. That's the trap she set, whether she meant to set it that clever or not. You can't move against her without proof, and you can't get proof without moving against her, and all the while she rides in smiling with her preserves." She came and sat across from him. "So we don't accuse, not yet. Not till we can prove it so plain that even her fine friends can't look away. We watch. We wait. We keep that tank guarded, and the children close, and we let her think she's won around, and we find the proof. And when we've got it, then you don't have to accuse her, William. The proof accuses her. And you stand clean." William lowered his hands and looked at her across the table, at this woman the town had thrown away, who'd walked up his road 2 weeks ago with a false paper and a canvas bag and no friend in the world, and who was now sitting in his kitchen thinking 3 moves ahead of a poisoner to protect his children and his name. "Where were you?" he said. "All my life." "Being thrown out of towns," Evelyn said. "So I'd be standing on that road the day you needed me." "The Lord works strange, William. Cruel and strange, and sometimes, if you live long enough, kind." She stood up and put the twist of poison paper carefully away in a tin evidence for later. "Now, you've got a herd to nurse, and I've got 10 men to feed, and neither one of us catches a poisoner on an empty stomach. Sit, eat, then we start watching." They started watching, and Sarah Mitchell, as if she could smell it, stopped coming. A week went by with no smart trotting horse on the road, and then 2, and Evelyn didn't trust the quiet, and neither did William, and the not trusting sat on the whole ranch like weather about to break. The herd recovered. The 28 lived. Life crept back toward something like ordinary Katie chattering now. Thomas laughing, the men fed and easy, William and Evelyn circling each other with that unsaid thing still hanging in the air between them. Both of them waiting. Both of them watching the road. It broke on a Sunday. It broke with the sound of many horses, which was a sound that never meant anything good. And Evelyn came out onto the porch, drying her hands, and saw them coming up the road in the Sunday morning light. 6 riders, 7, 8. And at the head of them, Sarah Mitchell, in her good gray wool, and beside Sarah, a heavy man with a badge on his vest, and behind them, a clutch of the county's finest, the respectable people, the church people, the friends Sarah had promised. "William," Evelyn said, and her voice didn't shake, but it cost her not to let it. "William, you'd best come out here. She's brought company." William came out. Thomas came to the door, and Evelyn put him back inside with Katie and told them to stay no matter what they heard. And she came and stood beside William on the porch as the riders reined up in the yard, and she saw the triumph in Sarah Mitchell's clever face, and understood that whatever was coming, Sarah thought she'd already won it. "William," Sarah said, and pitched her voice for the crowd. "I've brought Sheriff Doyle and some concerned friends. We've come about a serious matter, and I'm afraid it can't wait, not even for the Sabbath." The sheriff was a big, slow man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Carter," he said, touching his hat. "Sorry to come on you like this, but a complaint's been sworn, and when a complaint's sworn, I got to act on it. That's the job." "What complaint?" William said, and Sarah Mitchell smiled and delivered the blow she'd ridden all this way to deliver, and it was not the blow Evelyn had braced for. "Theft," Sarah said, "and fraud. Sheriff, this woman," she pointed at Evelyn, "this woman calling herself Evelyn Harper came to my brother-in-law's ranch under false references, which she has admitted to in front of witnesses forging. She has a documented history of theft silver from a family in Kansas run out of town for it. And in the 2 weeks since she wormed her way into this household, my late sister's jewelry, Margaret's jewelry, her wedding pearls, her mother's brooch kept in a box in the house has gone missing." She let the crowd murmur. "I noticed it gone the last time I called. I said nothing then. I hoped I was wrong. But I've searched my conscience, and I cannot stay silent while a known thief lives under the same roof as my sister's motherless children, wearing my sister's memory like a coat. And I've no doubt my sister's pearls under her apron. I want her searched, Sheriff. I want her room searched. And when you find Margaret's pearls where this woman hid them, I want her arrested, and I want these children delivered to their own bloodkin where they belong." The yard went silent. Every respectable face turned to Evelyn Harper, and every one of them had already decided she could see it. They'd decided on the road out. They'd decided the day she stepped down off the wagon because she was fat and strange and poor and alone. And that was all the evidence such people ever needed. And Evelyn felt the old cold drop through her, the auction block feeling, the feeling of a whole crowd weighing her and finding her guilty before she'd said a word. She'd been here before. God, she'd been here so many times before. and it never got easier the moment when a room decided you were what it already wanted you to be. "Search her room, then," William said. Evelyn turned to him stricken. "Search it," William said again, louder to the sheriff, and his face was carved from stone. "Go on, search every inch of it. Search her person if the law allows, and a woman's here to do it decent. Search this whole house top to bottom." He looked at Sarah, and his voice dropped low and terrible. "Because when you don't find one single thing, Sarah, not one pearl, not one earring, not so much as a hairpin of Margaret's, then every soul standing in my yard is going to watch you be proved a liar, and I'm going to make sure they remember it. So by all means, search." Sarah's smile flickered, just for an instant, and Evelyn saw it flicker, and in that flicker, she understood something that turned her cold all over again, worse than before. Because a woman who'd truly only noticed missing pearls and come in good faith would be steady now, certain glad of the search. But that flicker, that half-second of doubt in Sarah Mitchell's clever eyes, that was not the face of a woman who feared the search would turn up nothing. That was the face of a woman who feared it would turn up exactly what she'd put there. "Sheriff," Evelyn said, and her voice cut clean across the yard, steady as a struck bell, and every head turned. "Before you go up, I'll ask one thing, and I'll ask it in front of all these good Sunday people so there's witnesses. When did Mrs. Mitchell last set foot inside this house?" The sheriff frowned. "How's that matter?" "It matters a great deal, because I keep that house top to bottom, every room, and I know who comes and goes. So I'm asking Mrs. Mitchell in front of all of you, when were you last inside the Carter house? Not the yard, not the porch. Inside, in the rooms, near the box where Margaret's pearls were kept." And Evelyn watched Sarah Mitchell's fine face, and watched her open her mouth to say never, or weeks ago, or some safe answer, and watched her hesitate one beat too long, because Sarah didn't know what Evelyn knew, didn't know whether someone had seen. And in a lie, you can't afford to be caught. The hesitation is the whole confession. "That's an impertinent question from a servant," Sarah said, "and it's got nothing to do with." "It's got everything to do with it," Evelyn said, "and you know it does, which is why you won't answer it. So let me answer it for you. You were inside this house 4 days ago, Wednesday afternoon, while Mr. Carter and every hand on this place was down at the South Flat nursing the poisoned cattle, and I was down there with them running the water, and this house stood empty from noon till dark, except it wasn't empty, was it? Because Thomas came back for his hat around 3 o'clock, and Thomas saw a horse he knew tied behind the barn. Where a body ties a horse, they don't want seen from the road." She turned to the porch. "Thomas, come out here, son. Nobody's in trouble. Just tell the sheriff true, whose horse did you see tied behind the barn Wednesday afternoon?" Thomas came to the edge of the porch. He looked at his aunt. He looked at his father. And the boy, 7 years old, swallowed hard and said in a clear, high voice that carried to every soul in that yard, "Aunt Sarah's. It was Aunt Sarah's gray. I know her horse. I petted it. She wasn't nowhere to be seen, but her horse was tied back there, and I thought it was funny 'cause she didn't come say hello." The yard erupted in murmurs. Sarah Mitchell had gone white as bone. "He's a child," she said, too fast, too high. "He's confused, he's William? Are you going to let this woman put words in your own son's mouth against his blood?" "He's not confused," William said slowly, and Evelyn watched the whole thing come together behind his eyes, watched him understand at last fully what his dead wife's sister was. "He knows your horse, Sarah. He's petted it 100 times, and you were here Wednesday in an empty house, when you'd no reason to be, and every reason to hide your horse behind the barn." He turned to the sheriff, and his voice was iron. "Sheriff Doyle, I want that room searched now, this minute. But I want you to remember, and I want all these good people to remember that the one who told you to search it was her, and the one who just placed her alone in my empty house 4 days ago near my dead wife's jewelry box was a 7-year-old boy who's got no reason on this earth to lie about his own beloved aunt." The sheriff looked between them, slow understanding dawning in his heavy face. "Well," he said, "reckon I'd best go have that look." He went up. The whole yard waited. Evelyn stood beside William on the porch and did not touch him, though she wanted to, and she felt Sarah Mitchell's eyes on her, and she turned and met them. And what she saw in them was no longer triumph, and no longer even certainty, but the wild, cornered fury of a righteous woman who has just felt the ground open under her own feet. The sheriff came back down. He came slow, and in his big hand he held a small cloth bundle, and he unwrapped it there on the steps for all to see, and inside lay a string of pearls and a mother-of-pearl brooch, and Evelyn heard the crowd suck in its breath. "Found 'em," Sheriff Doyle said heavily. "Right where a body'd look first, under the mattress in the cook's room, tucked in real careless, almost like—" And here the slow man's eyes lifted and settled not on Evelyn, but on Sarah Mitchell. "Almost like somebody wanted 'em found quick and easy by a searchin' man, somebody who knew right where to send me." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Evelyn had ever heard. "That proves nothing," Sarah said, but her voice had cracked straight down the middle now. "It proves she hid them. It proves—" "It proves," Sheriff Doyle said, "that the pearls was in her room, and the boy proves you was in the house alone 4 days back with nobody watchin'. And I got to tell you, Ms. Mitchell, in 30 years of this work, I learned that when the one who's loudest to search is also the only one who was ever alone with what turns up well. That's a knot I got to sit and untangle real careful before I go arrestin' anybody. And I'll want to talk to that feed store in town, too, about who's been buying arsenic, since Carter here tells me somebody poisoned his herd with it not 2 weeks past the same 2 weeks you're describin'." He folded the pearls back into the cloth. "So nobody's getting arrested in this yard today. But somebody's coming to town with me to answer some questions. And Ms. Mitchell—" He tipped his hat, and the courtesy was the coldest thing in the world. "I'm afraid that somebody's you." Sarah Mitchell looked around the yard at her fine, respectable friends, and Evelyn watched every one of those Sunday faces turn slowly away from her, the way such faces always turn the herd instinct of the respectable sensing which way the wind had shifted. And she watched Sarah Mitchell understand that the weapon she'd forged had turned in her hand, that the crowd she'd brought to condemn a fat, thieving stranger was now looking at her, and that the story, the terrible, powerful story that ran ahead of a person and decided their fate, before they opened their mouth, the story had for once turned against the one who'd always known how to wield it. "You," Sarah breathed, staring at Evelyn, and there were tears standing in her furious eyes now, and Evelyn understood they were real, and that they were grief, and that under all of it, Sarah Mitchell was a woman who had loved her sister so fiercely and so poorly that the love had curdled into this. "You've taken everything. Her home, her children, her husband. And now you've taken my good name in front of the whole county. Are you happy? Is this what you wanted you?" "No," Evelyn said, and to the shock of every soul in that yard, her voice was gentle. "No, Sarah. This isn't what I wanted. I never wanted any of this. I'd have served you tea in that kitchen every day for 20 years and held my tongue and never said a cross word if you'd only once let me. I didn't take Margaret's home or her children or her memory. You gave them away, ma'am. You threw them at my feet trying to hit me with them, and I caught them because somebody had to, because these babies needed catching. That's all I ever did. I caught what you threw." She came down one step toward the broken, furious woman on the horse. "You loved her. I know you did. I can see how much, because look what it drove you to. But Sarah, she's gone. And no pearls and no poison and no ruined strangers going to bring her back. All this only breaks the living. It won't mend the dead. It never does." And Sarah Mitchell put her gloved hand over her mouth, and her shoulders shook, and the fine gray wool trembled, and she wept in her saddle in front of the whole county. Not the tears of a caught schemer, but the tears of a woman looking down all at once at the wreckage of what her grief had made her do. The sheriff clucked to his horse and took her bridle gentle the way you lead a horse that's about to bolt, and the fine Sunday people wheeled their mounts and fell in behind, careful now to ride nearer the sheriff than the Mitchell woman, already rehearsing. Evelyn had no doubt the versions of this story they'd tell in town by nightfall, how they'd always had their suspicions, how they'd never fully trusted how they'd come out on Sunday, have to protect that poor put-upon cook. The herd turning as one, sensing the wind. Evelyn watched them go down the road in a long, dusty line, Sarah Mitchell small and broken at the heart of it, and she did not feel triumph. She'd thought she might. She'd carried the poison of that woman's cruelty for 2 weeks, and she'd thought that watching it turn back on her might taste sweet. It didn't. It tasted like ashes and sorrow and the particular grief of watching what pain does to people who won't set it down. The dust settled. The yard was empty, and William Carter stood on his own porch in the Sunday quiet, and he turned to Evelyn Harper, and his face was a wreckage of a dozen things, grief and fury and shame and relief, and something else underneath all of it, something that had been trying to say itself for 2 weeks and kept getting interrupted by catastrophe. "Thomas," he called, not looking away from Evelyn. "Take your sister inside and get her some of that bread. Both of you stay put a while. Your pa's got something to say, and he's got to say it out here in the light on his own 2 feet to this woman, and it can't wait one more minute or one more disaster, or I'll lose the nerve of it forever." And the screen door swung shut behind the children, and William Carter took off his hat and turned the brim slow in his big scarred hands, and looked at the fat woman the whole county had just tried and failed to throw away. And Evelyn Harper stood very still on the porch and felt her armored, starving 32-year-old heart begin to pound like it knew before her mind did that the thing she'd been most afraid of in all the world was finally about to arrive. "Evelyn?" William said, and then he stopped and turned his hat another quarter turn and started over. "Evelyn, I had a whole speech, wrote it around in my head for 2 weeks, and now the moment's come and every word of it's gone clean out of me, and I'm standing here like a green boy at his first dance." "Then don't make a speech," Evelyn said softly. "You're not a speech-making man, William. Don't be one now. Just say the true thing. Plain. The way you say everything else. The plain thing." He nodded. His jaw worked. "All right, the plain thing is this. I looked at you wrong on that road. You know I did. I told you so the first night. But it took me till right now, watching you stand on my porch and turn back a whole county that came to break you, to understand just how wrong. Because I looked at your body and I thought I saw the whole of you and Evelyn. I have never in my life been so far off about anything." He took a breath. "I saw your size before I saw your heart. That's the truth of me, and I'm ashamed of it." "Most people did," Evelyn said very quiet. "See the size first. Most everybody my whole life. You're not different for having done it, William. You'd only be different if you stopped." "I stopped." "I know you did. That's why I'm still standing here." They looked at each other across the length of the porch. "I want you to stay," William said. "Not on trial, not as the cook, not as a body I hired to mind my kids and feed my men. I want," and here the hard man's voice went rough and he pushed through it, "I want you to stay as my wife, Evelyn Harper. I want to marry you. There. That's the plain thing. That's the true thing. I've wanted to say it since the day my girl said Miss Cluck in your arms, and I looked at you crying in the dirt, and knew clear, as I know my own name, that you were the finest thing that ever walked up my road. And I've been trying to say it ever since, and the world kept catching fire before I could." Evelyn Harper stood very still. And then she did the thing that William Carter did not expect, the thing that no man had ever had to brace for in front of her, because no man had ever gotten this far. She shook her head. "No," she said. The word dropped into the Sunday quiet. William went pale. "No," he repeated. "No." Her eyes were bright and her voice was steady, and it was breaking her heart to say it, and she said it anyway. "Not like this, William. Not today. Not the same afternoon you found out your dead wife's sister poisoned your cattle and framed me for theft in front of the whole county. Not while your blood's up and your gratitude's running over and you just watched me save your name on this porch." She wrapped her arms around herself. "You feel like you owe me, and you feel low about your kin, and you feel high about the children, and you're a decent man, and a decent man. In a moment like this reaches for the good thing standing in front of him. I understand it. But William, I can't be the good thing you reached for on a hard day. I've been that before. I've been what a man reaches for when he's low and lonely and grateful, and I've watched it burn off like morning fog the second his life got easy again, and it near killed me. I won't survive it twice, so no, not today. Not out of gratitude, not out of guilt. You think this is gratitude?" And there was heat in William's voice now, real heat, the first she'd ever heard from him. "You think I'd offer a woman my name, my children, my whole life, because she gave me a good excuse to feel low about Sarah Evelyn? I'm 38 years old. I buried a wife. I know the difference between gratitude and—" He stopped himself. "And what?" Evelyn said. "Say it." "And love," William said. "I know the difference between gratitude and love. I've felt both. Gratitude's what I felt when Briggs stayed on after Margaret passed and kept this place from going under while I was too broke inside to do it myself. This ain't that. This ain't anything like that." Evelyn's throat closed. She made herself keep talking through it because if she stopped, she'd break. "You buried a wife you loved," she said. "Everybody says how you loved her. Margaret the Jewel rode like a man, kept the house like a picture. And here I am, the opposite of her in every way a woman can be, opposite the fat charity cook, and you want me to believe that 4 months after you laid her down, you've gone and no. No, William. It's too fast, and it's too strange, and it's the kind of thing a lonely man tells himself because the loneliness is unbearable, and I'm warm, and I'm here." Her voice cracked. "I'd rather cook your suppers for 20 years and love your babies from across the kitchen than have you turn to me one morning 3 years from now, after the grief's lifted and a proper woman's come to town, and see in your face that you settled, that you reached for me on a hard day and got stuck with me. I've seen that look on a man's face. I saw it slow over years on my own husband's. I will not see it on yours. I couldn't bear it from you. It'd finish me." And there it was. The thing under all her walls. The thing she'd never told a living soul, laid out on the porch in the Sunday light. William Carter was quiet a long moment. "Your husband," he said. "You loved him." "I did. God help me, I did." "And he settled for you." Evelyn shut her eyes. "He was a good man, a kind man. He married me because I was there, and I was willing, and no one else would have him, either. He had a bad leg from the war, and no land, and a mean drunk for a father. And between the two of us, we were about the sorriest pair of leftovers the good Lord ever swept into a corner. And we made a life. A small, poor, tired life. And he was kind to me every day of it." She opened her eyes, and they were wet. "But I knew. I always knew. I was the woman he ended up with, not the woman he'd have chosen if the choosing had been free. I saw it when he thought I wasn't looking. And I told myself kind was enough, that a woman like me had no business asking for more than kind. And maybe it was enough. But it left a hole in me, William. A hole the exact shape of being chosen, of being wanted first and not last. And I have carried that hole for 32 years, and I would rather carry it to my grave empty than fill it with a thing that turns out to be another man settling. Do you understand me now? Do you see why I can't say yes to a man on the worst day of his week?" William set his hat down on the porch rail. He crossed the boards to her slow, and he did not touch her, but he stood close as the roof close as the well in the dark. "I'm going to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to hear all of it, because you've made up a story about me and about Margaret, and you've been living inside it, and it's wrong, Evelyn. It's wrong in a way I've never told a soul, and I'm about to tell you." He took a breath. Margaret didn't love this ranch. She loved being the woman everyone admired for running it. There's a difference, and I lived inside that difference for 11 years. She was hard, Evelyn. Not cruel, she wasn't cruel, but hard and cold, and she measured everything, everybody, by whether it made the Carter name shine brighter, including me, including the children. His voice dropped. "You want to know why Katie stopped talking when her mama died? Everybody in the county thinks it's grief. Pure grief, a baby missing her mother. And it is grief. But it's a strange grief. Evelyn and I've never understood it till I watched you with her. And now I do, and it shames me to say it. Katie stopped talking because for 4 years, the only time her mother paid her any mind was to correct her, to hush her, to tell her she was too loud, too much not a proper little lady. Margaret loved that child, the way she loved everything at arm's length as a reflection of herself. And when she died, Katie didn't just lose her mama. She lost her last chance to ever be good enough for her. And a 4-year-old don't have the words for that, so she stopped using words at all. Evelyn stared at him. The whole shape of that silent child rearranged itself in her mind. "You gave her back her words," William said. "In 2 weeks. You know how you did it. You didn't correct her. Not once. You let her be exactly as loud and as much and as odd as she wanted to be. And you named a chicken with her, and you told her the supper would wait on her patient, and she heard. She heard for the first time in her whole little life that she didn't have to earn her place at the table, that she was wanted just for being. Margaret never once gave her that. I never knew how to. You walked up my road and gave it to her in a fortnight." His voice broke clean. "So don't you tell me I'm reaching for you on a hard day. Don't you tell me I'm settling. Margaret was the woman I chose when I was young and dazzled and didn't know the difference between a woman who shines and a woman who warms. I spent 11 years cold beside a woman everyone envied me for. And then you walked up my road, and for the first time in my life, I found out what it was to be warm, and I am not. I am not going to let you stand on my porch and call that settling. You're not what I settled for, Evelyn Harper. You're what I'd have chosen first if I'd ever once in my life been wise enough to know what to look for." The Sunday quiet held them. Evelyn Harper, who had steeled herself against gratitude and against guilt and against a lonely man reaching for a warm thing, found she had built no wall at all against this, against a hard man telling her she was what he'd have chosen first. And it went through her like light through water, and she began, silently, helplessly, to cry. "You can't know that," she whispered. "You can't know you wouldn't come to regret it. The town William. Sarah broken, but not the only one who thinks that way. Every Sunday at church, folks looking, whispering, pitying you for the fat wife. Let 'em whisper." He took her hands. He held them in his big scarred ones, careful of the rope-cut palms that had near healed now. "Let the whole county whisper till they're blue. You think I care what a pack of folks who came out here on a Sunday to watch a good woman get broke think about who I marry? I watched them today, Evelyn. I watched every respectable face in this county turn away from a woman the second the wind shifted. That's what their good opinion's worth. That's what I'd be protecting if I let their whispers keep me from you, the good opinion of people who'd sell you out by nightfall. I don't want it. I'd trade every scrap of it for one supper at a table where my daughter talks and my son laughs and the woman across from me chose to be there." His hands tightened on hers. "So here's my plain answer to your plain fear. Yes, folks'll whisper. Yes, there'll be hard Sundays. And no, I will never once, not on my worst day, not when I'm old and mean and tired, look across my table and think I settled. Because I know what settling feels like. I did it for 11 years, and this ain't it. This is the opposite of it. This is the thing I gave up ever hoping for." Evelyn was weeping in earnest now. The tears she never let anyone see running free down her face, and she didn't turn away to hide them, and that not turning away was the biggest thing she had ever done. "I need to say something back to you," she said. "And it's going to be hard. And I need you to let me get through it. Can you do that? Can you just hold my hands and let me get through it?" "I can do that. When I was a girl," Evelyn said, "my mother told me she wasn't cruel either. Understand, she thought she was preparing me. She thought she was being kind. She sat me down when I was maybe 10 and already bigger than the other girls, and she said, 'Evelyn, you're going to have to be twice as good as any other woman to get half as much. Because the world's going to decide what you are before you open your mouth, and the only thing you can do about it is make sure that when they finally do listen, you've got something worth hearing.' And I believed her. I built my whole life on it. Be twice as good. Cook twice as fine, work twice as hard. Be twice as patient, twice as kind. And maybe if you're twice as good at everything, you'll earn the scraps of what a pretty woman gets handed free." Her voice shook. "And it worked, William. It's why I can do what I do. It's why I can feed 10 men on nothing and save a herd and turn back a county on a porch. Every bit of it, every skill I've got, I built out of the belief that I had to earn my place on this earth, because I sure wasn't born deserving one. And now you're standing here." She had to stop. "Gather, go on. You're standing here telling me I don't have to earn it, that you want me just for being, that I'm what you'd have chosen first. And William, that's the one thing in all the world I don't know how to hear. I know how to be needed. I've made myself so useful my whole life that folks couldn't afford to throw me out even when they wanted to. But wanted, just wanted for nothing, for no use, just for being the woman I am." She was crying too hard to go on for a moment. "I don't have any practice at it. I don't have the muscle for it. You're going to have to be patient with me the way I was patient with Katie. You're going to have to set the wanting down in front of me and tell me it'll wait, that it won't be snatched, that I don't have to perform for it or earn it or cook my way into deserving it. Because otherwise, I'll do what I always do. I'll try to earn it. I'll cook and clean and work myself to the bone trying to be worth it. And I'll never once let myself just be loved, and it'll wear me down to nothing the same as being unloved would. Do you understand? Can you love a woman who doesn't know how to be loved without earning it?" And William Carter. Hard. William Carter, who paid in deeds, and not in words, did the only thing there was to do. He let go of her hands, and he put his arms around her all the way around, and he pulled her against his chest, and held her, held all of her the weight the world had mocked, and he held her the way she'd held Katie in the dirt, patient, and certain, and asking nothing. "I can learn it," he said into her hair. "You taught a scared little girl she was wanted just for being in 2 weeks, and you'd never done it before either. You learned it on her for her because she needed it. Well, I'll learn it on you, for you, because you need it. And I've got the best teacher in the territory living right in my own house." He held her tighter. "You don't have to earn one thing from me, Evelyn Harper. Not one supper, not one day. I'll tell you every morning till you believe it, and then I'll tell you every morning after that, just to hear myself say it. You're wanted, just for being. That's all. That's the whole of it. It'll wait on you patient as you need. It won't be snatched." They stood like that on the porch a long time, the fat woman and the lonely cowboy in the Sunday quiet, with the dust of the county's retreat still hanging in the summer air. And inside the house, 2 children peeked out the window and saw their father holding the woman who'd given them back their voices and their appetites and their laughter, and Thomas whispered to Katie, "It's all right now. I think it's all right now." And Katie whispered back, fierce and certain, "I told you I liked her." When at last Evelyn drew back, her face was wet and swollen, and she'd never looked less like Margaret Carter, the jewel, the woman everyone admired, and she'd never in her life been more beautiful. And William told her so, and she laughed and told him he was a liar and a fool, and he said he'd be her liar and her fool, and something that had been clenched shut in Evelyn Harper for 32 years finally began to open. "I still can't say yes today," she said. But she was smiling now, and it was a different no than before. "Not out of the fear anymore. You knocked the fear down, William. I'll give you that, you knocked it clean down. But I want to say yes on a plain ordinary day when nobody's poisoning cattle, and nobody's riding up with a sheriff and the whole county's not watching. I want to say yes to you over a plain supper on a plain Tuesday when there's no drama and no gratitude and no rescue in it, just you and me and the truth. Can you wait for that? Can you court me proper, William Carter, like I'm a woman worth courting for a few plain ordinary weeks? And let me say yes when it's quiet, so I know for the rest of my life it was the yes of a clear-eyed woman and not a rescued one." "I can wait," William said. "I've waited 38 years to find out what warm feels like. I reckon I can wait a few plain Tuesdays to hear you say yes, and I'll court you proper. I'll court you so proper the whole county'll talk about that too." He grinned, and it took 10 years off his weathered face. Let him. Let him talk about the widower Carter courting his cook with flowers he picked his own self like a fool boy. Best thing they'll have to talk about all year. And so he courted her. Word of the poisoning and the framing and the pearls under the mattress ran through the county like fire through dry grass, and it ran for once in Evelyn's favor, because Thomas's clear, high voice placing Sarah's gray horse behind the barn had been heard by 20 respectable witnesses who now competed to tell the tale, and the feed store confirmed that Sarah Mitchell had indeed bought arsenic, claiming it was for rats in her cellar 3 days before the Carter herd died. Sheriff Doyle sat with it and untangled it careful as he'd promised, and though it never came to a trial, the Mitchell family was old and proud and moved heaven and earth to keep Sarah out of a courtroom. It came to this, that Sarah Mitchell left the territory before the summer was out, gone to distant relations back east, her good name in the county as dead as the 14 heads she'd poisoned. And the story that ran ahead of Evelyn Harper, now for the first time in her life, was not the fat thief, not the charity case, not the trouble that follows a woman from town to town, but something new, something she'd never once had run ahead of her. The woman who saved the Carter Ranch. The woman who caught the poisoner. The woman the whole county tried to break on a Sunday porch and couldn't. She heard it change. She heard it in town when she went in for supplies, and the storekeeper who'd have looked at her sideways a month past now tipped his hat and called her ma'am with respect in it. She heard it from the wives who'd have whispered and now nodded. She didn't trust it, a story that turns for you can turn again. She knew that better than anyone. But she felt it, the strange, unfamiliar warmth of a whole town, deciding for once that she was somebody worth being kind to. And she felt William's courting, which was the strangest warmth of all. He was terrible at it. He was a hard man who'd married young the first time and never once had to woo anybody. And he came at courting like he came at a fence that needed mending, grimly determinedly doing it wrong and doing it anyway. He picked her wildflowers, and half of them were weeds, and he presented them like a boy, and she pressed every one of them weeds and all in the family Bible. He tried to say soft things, and they came out gruff and sideways, and she treasured every clumsy one of them more than any pretty speech she'd ever heard. He'd find reasons to be in the kitchen. He'd sit and watch her cook and just be there easy. And one evening, he picked up a knife and asked her, awkward as a schoolboy, to teach him to cut an onion the way she did. And she stood behind him and put her hands over his big scarred ones and showed him. And it was the most romantic thing that had ever happened to her. A man wanting to learn the work of her hands, and she cried a little into his shirt collar, and he pretended not to notice, which was its own kind of tenderness. The children bloomed. Katie talked now from morning to night, a whole 4 years of dammed-up words come pouring out all at once, and half of them were about Miss Cluck, and the other half were questions. Endless questions, the questions of a child who's finally learned that asking won't get her hushed. And Thomas had started calling Evelyn Miss Evelyn, instead of just watching her warily from doorways, and then one day without any fuss, without asking anybody. He'd started calling her something else, and Evelyn had been at the stove when she heard it, and had gone very still. "Ma," Thomas had said, "just testing it. Just quiet. Ma, is supper near ready?" And Evelyn had not turned around because her face had done something she didn't want him to see, and she'd said steady as she could make it, "Near ready, Thomas. Wash your hands." And that was all. Neither of them made anything of it. But that night, she'd sat on the edge of her narrow bed and held the word to her chest like the most precious thing she'd ever been given, because she had never once thought, not in her whole barren life, that any child would ever call her that. She told William about it. He was quiet a while. Then he said, "He lost his mother young, and he's a smart boy. He knows the difference between the woman who bore him and the woman who saved him, and he's decided he wants to call the one who saved him Ma. I won't correct him. Will you?" "No," Evelyn whispered. "No, I won't correct him. Then it's settled. And it's another reason I aim to marry you if I ever manage to court you proper enough to earn the yes. My son's already claimed you. A man ought to make honest what his children have already decided is true." The plain Tuesday came in the last week of summer. There was no drama in it. That was the whole point of it, and Evelyn had waited for it on purpose. No poisoned cattle, no sheriff, no county on the porch. Just a supper, an ordinary supper, the men fed and gone to the bunkhouse, the children put to bed, the kitchen scrubbed down and quiet, and Evelyn and William sitting at the table with the last of the coffee between them, and the summer dark warm at the windows, and nothing wrong for 10 miles in any direction. William didn't get down on his knee. He'd asked her weeks back whether she wanted the whole show, and she'd said no. God, no. She wanted it plain, and he'd remembered. So he just reached across the plain kitchen table and took her hand in his and said, simple as anything, "Evelyn Harper, it's a plain Tuesday. Nobody's dying. Nothing's on fire. The children are asleep, and the coffee's good, and I'm as clear-eyed as a man ever gets. So I'm asking you again the way you wanted asking. Will you marry me? Not because I owe you, and not because you're useful, and not because I'm lonely. Because you're the woman I'd have chosen first, and I'm finally wise enough to know it, and I want to spend every plain Tuesday I've got left sitting at this table across from you." And Evelyn Harper looked at him across the plain scrubbed table in the quiet summer dark, on the plainest ordinary night of the year, with no rescue in it, and no gratitude, and no fear. And she found that the room inside her with the thick walls, the room she'd built for a lifetime of cruel words, had somewhere along the way emptied out, that the cruel words had lost their power, that Sarah's and her mother's and the wagon drivers and 32 years of sideways looks had all gone quiet at last, and that there was room now finally for something else. And she knew, clear-eyed and certain and wanting nothing, exactly what she wanted to put there. "Yes," said Evelyn Harper. And this time there was no wall behind it, no fear beneath it, no arithmetic of herself, no earning. Just the word, clear and whole, and freely given, the yes of a woman who had finally learned at 32, on a plain Tuesday, that she was wanted just for being. "Yes, William, I'll marry you." They were married in the fall, and half the county came, and Evelyn knew exactly why they came, and she'd made her peace with it. They came out of curiosity as much as goodwill to see the widower Carter wed the fat cook who'd saved his ranch and caught a poisoner, to have a look at the strange match everyone was still talking about. And Evelyn had thought about it hard in the weeks before, and she'd said to William one evening, "They're coming to gawk, half of them. You know that. To see the spectacle of it. The big rancher and his big cook." And William had said, "Let 'em come and gawk. And let 'em go home having eaten the finest wedding supper this county ever tasted, cooked by the bride herself, because she wouldn't let anybody else touch it, and let 'em try to gawk with their mouths that full." And Evelyn had laughed, because it was exactly right. It was the perfect answer. And it was pure William. You couldn't argue a hard county out of its meanness with a speech, but you could feed it into silence. So she cooked her own wedding supper. She wouldn't hear otherwise. She was up before dawn the day of in the kitchen. That was hers, now. No trial about it, and she cooked like she'd never cooked in her life. And when the county sat down at the long tables in the Carter yard to gawk at the strange bride, they found themselves instead eating the best meal of their lives. And Evelyn watched it happen, the way it always happened. Watched the food do what her words never could. Watched hard, suspicious faces go soft and astonished over her cooking. Watched the gawking turn plate by plate into something closer to respect. Old Briggs stood up at that supper unasked, and this was a man who did not make speeches, and he tapped his knife on his cup till the yard went quiet. "I ain't a talking man," Briggs said, "and everybody here knows it, so you'll pardon me for being brief. I've been on this ranch through 3 hard years, through the drought, through the boss losing his first wife, God rest her, through the poisoning last summer that near finished us." He turned and looked at Evelyn where she sat at the head table in the simple dress she'd made herself. "And I want to say in front of God and this whole county that I have watched this woman right here walk up that road with nothing but a canvas bag and no friend in the world. And I have watched her save this ranch, save these children, and save this man. And I don't mean save his cattle, though she done that too. I mean save him. I knew William Carter before she come. I know him now. He's a different man, and it's her doing, and any soul in this county that ever laughed at her better take a good long look at what she built out of the scraps everybody else threw away, and then take a good long look in the mirror and ask themselves what they ever built out of anything." He raised his cup. "To the bride, finest cook and bravest woman I ever knew, and I've rode the river with a lot of both." And the county drank to her. The whole county, the gawkers and the whisperers, and the ones who'd turned away on the Sunday porch. Every one of them stood and raised a cup to Evelyn Harper Carter, and she sat there among them, with her new husband's hand in hers, and her new children beside her. And she did not cry, because she'd promised herself she wouldn't cry at her own wedding. And she kept the promise right up until little Katie climbed into her lap in front of everybody and put her small arms around her neck and said loud, so the whole county heard it, "You're my ma now, my real ma, forever and ever." And then Evelyn cried. And she didn't care who saw. And half the county cried with her. And William Carter put his arm around all three of them. And that was the wedding of the fat cook and the lonely cowboy that the county talked about for 20 years after, and never once in all that talk did anybody call it settling. The years came on. They came on the way. Years do, on a working ranch in seasons and calvings and harvests in droughts, weathered and winters survived, and Carter Ranch, which had been dying the summer. Evelyn walked up its road, did not die. It thrived. And it thrived, everyone agreed, because of her. Not because she brought money, she brought none, and not because she brought luck, but because she brought the one thing the ranch had been starving for as surely as its cattle had starved for water. She brought warmth. She turned a cold, grief-frozen, half-dead place into a home, and homes, it turns out, are the thing that make everything else possible. Men worked harder for a warm table to come into. Children grew straight and easy in a house where they were wanted just for being. And William Carter, who had spent 11 years cold beside a woman everyone envied him for, spent the rest of his life warm beside a woman half the county had once mocked, and he counted himself out loud and often the luckiest man in Montana. She never did stop cooking miracles out of nothing. It was in her too deep to stop. Long after the ranch could afford the finest cuts and the freshest everything, Evelyn still saved, the scraps still coaxed life out of the wilted and the leftover, and the thrown away, still made feasts out of ruin, because it was who she was. It was the whole shape of her, and she'd learned it in a school so hard she couldn't unlearn it and wouldn't have if she could. There ain't much in this world so far gone, it can't be brought back. She'd tell the children, and later the grandchildren standing at that same worn work table. Not meat, not vegetables, not people. Everything's got some good left in it if you know how to look, and if you're willing to do the work of finding it. Bogo jamimya bibo. And the children would roll their eyes because they'd heard it 1,000 times, and they'd remember it their whole lives, and some of them would say it to their own children standing at their own tables. And that was how a thing Evelyn Harper learned alone and hungry on the cruel road became a thing a whole family carried forward, generation on generation, long after she was gone. Katie grew up talking. Lord, how she grew up talking. The silent little girl who'd gone 4 months without a word became the woman who could talk the ears off a fence post, warm and funny and afraid of nothing. And when she was grown, and someone asked her once what her mother had been like, she didn't say the fat one or the cook or the one who wasn't my real mother. She said, "My mother was the bravest person I ever knew, and the kindest. And she taught me that being loud and being much and being exactly who you are isn't something you have to apologize for. She taught me that just by never once making me feel like I had to earn my seat at her table." And she said it with her chin up, the way Evelyn used to lift her chin, though Katie never knew where she'd learned it. Thomas grew up and took over the ranch, and he ran it warm the way he'd been raised, and he married a girl the county considered plain, and nobody could talk him out of it, and he never regretted it a day, because his mother had taught him his ma. The only ma he chose to claim, that you look at the heart before you look at anything else, that the story that runs ahead of a person is nearly always a lie, and that the finest things in life are most often the ones the world was fool enough to throw away. And Evelyn Harper. Carter, who'd been left on a dusty road like a crate too heavy to haul, who'd been laughed at and run out and thrown away by more towns than she could count, who'd built her whole self out of the belief that she had to be twice as good to earn half as much. Evelyn lived out her long life at the warm heart of a family that had chosen her and wanted her and never once let her forget it. William told her every morning, just as he'd promised. Every single morning for 30 years, first thing before the coffee, he'd take her hand and say, "You're wanted, Evelyn, just for being. It'll wait on you patient. It won't be snatched." And for the first years, she'd needed to hear it. Needed it like water, and slowly over time, she'd needed it less. And then a day came when he said it, and she laughed and said, "William Carter, I know, I've known for years. You can stop now." And he'd said, "I know you know. I don't say it for you anymore. I say it 'cause I like the sound of it. Man's got a right to tell his wife she's wanted." And he never did stop, not till the day he died, an old man in the bed they'd shared with her hand in his. And the last thing he said to her, thin and certain, was, "You were the one I'd have chosen first." And Evelyn held his hand and told him she knew, and that she'd have chosen him too. And she had on a plain Tuesday, clear-eyed and wanting nothing, and it was the truest yes of her life. She lived on a good many years after him. She was never lonely, though she missed him every day, because the house he'd left her was full of children and grandchildren, full of the hands who still ate at her table, full of the warmth she'd built, and that now at last held her up the way she'd spent her whole life holding up everyone else. The girl who'd never once been carried got carried in her old age by the whole family she'd made, and she let herself be carried, which was the last hard thing she ever had to learn. And the sweetest. There was a day near the end of her life when a young woman came up the road to Carter Ranch looking for work. She was a stranger, and she was poor, and she'd been turned away in town, and Evelyn watched from the porch as the girl walked up the long road with a bundle over her shoulder and no friend in the world. And that particular set to her shoulders that Evelyn knew better than anyone alive. The set of a person bracing to be turned away one more time. And the girl was heavy and plain and tired. And the world had clearly done to her exactly what it had once done to Evelyn. Evelyn met her at the bottom of the steps. She was old now, and gray and moved slow, but she came down every step to meet the girl on level ground, the way William had once come down to meet her. "You looking for work?" Evelyn asked. "Yes, ma'am." The girl's chin came up defiant, braced. "I can cook. I can keep a house. I'm stronger than I look. I just need one chance, that's all. One chance to show you." "Stop," Evelyn said gently, and the girl stopped, startled. "You don't have to do the speech, honey. I know the speech. I invented the speech." She smiled, and her old eyes were warm and wet. "You don't have to earn your way in the door here. Not at this ranch. You're hungry and you're tired, and you walked a long, hard road, and that's all the reference I need. Come in. Come in and eat first, and we'll talk about work after, because nobody on this ranch ever had to earn a meal, and nobody ever will not, so long as I'm drawing breath." She took the astonished girl by the arm and turned her toward the warm-lit kitchen. "There's a story I'm going to tell you sometime about a woman who got left on a road just like the one you walked up today. But not tonight. Tonight you just eat and you rest and you let yourself be somewhere that wants you. Can you do that? I know it's hard. It's the hardest thing there is for folks like us. But you try." And she led the girl inside into the warmth, into the light of the kitchen that had saved her, and that she had made a place of salvation, and she sat her down and set food in front of her, and told her soft, "It'll wait on you. Nobody's going to snatch it. Eat when you're ready." And she watched the girl's braced shoulders slowly come down, watched the disbelief on her tired face, watched a person who had been thrown away. Her whole life dare to believe for the first time that she'd found a place that would keep her. And that was the whole of it in the end. That was what Evelyn Harper Carter did with the life she'd been given, the life the world had tried so hard to throw away. She took every cruel thing that had been done to her, every closed door and sideways look and crate on a road humiliation, and she turned it the way she turned scraps into feasts, into the exact medicine that a hurt world needed. She'd learned kindness in a school of pure cruelty, and she spent the rest of her days giving it away to everyone the world was fool enough to throw out, and the ranch became known for 100 miles in every direction as the place you went when there was nowhere else to go, the place that would take you in and feed you and want you. No matter what story ran ahead of you, no matter what you looked like, no matter what you'd been told you were worth. They buried her beside William when her time came. An old woman surrounded by a family that filled the whole churchyard, and the county turned out for it, the way it had turned out for her wedding. Only now, there was no gawking in it. None at all. Only grief and love and the particular ache of losing someone who had made a place warmer just by being in it. And on her stone at her own instruction given years before to Katie, who wept when she heard it and swore she'd honor it, they carved no dates and no fine words. Only the thing Evelyn had asked for, the thing she'd learned on a hard road and spent a lifetime proving true. The world may judge you by what it sees first, but your worth is measured by what you bring when everything else is taken away. And underneath it, smaller, the words, the family added themselves, because they couldn't help it, because it was simply and plainly true, and everyone who'd ever eaten at her table knew it. She was wanted, just for being, and she is forever the heart of this ranch.